Mine is the wind and the howling darkness. I am as unlike those mewling things you call demons as an eagle is unlike a fly. You cannot hope to defeat me. Give me the cup or die. And this is Gracie Talks. Welcome to my channel. Hello. Welcome. My name's Gracie, and I'm going to explain what's about to happen. This is my long-form recap of The Mortal Instruments City of Bones, written by Cassandra Clare. I have always loved long-form recap videos. The first one that I ever saw was Mike's Pretty Little Liars video. I was absolutely obsessed. Loved it. Loved everything about it. Loved the wall. You will see that the wall behind me is completely inspired by the PLL wall. I loved the pictures and the strings, the insanity of it all. I also watched Carrie Conread's videos of the SJM books, fell in love with that. And then I started thinking to myself, I didn't realize this was a thing that you could do, where you could talk about a niche interest of yours for 2 to 3 hours. And then I realized, if this is something that is socially acceptable, if this is something that people are doing, let me tell you about The Mortal Instruments. This was the book series that got me into reading when I was a kid. I got absolutely obsessed, loved it, and then it just started me on this really long spiral of a bunch of YA books and a very heavy obsession with Tumblr. I have loved these books for so long, which is why when I wanted to do something like this, I knew that it had to be The Mortal Instruments. And I was finally able to just give myself over to the full obsession that I have with them instead of holding back. And it's been so much fun. So I'm rereading the books now. I have only read the first book in making this one. I didn't want any spoilers, even for myself. I wanted to be able to go through each one and not know what was coming and be surprised with everything as it came up. So I've only read the first book in this. There are references to the movie and to the TV shows, but really what we're here to do is go through the official source material, the document, which is the book that was written by Cassandra Clare. There are sensitive topics in this book. If you have not read it, I would suggest that you look up the trigger warnings for the book before watching this, but there are heavy topics. We will be respectful as we go through them, but at the end of the day, again, we're here to discuss the book in and of itself. We're gonna talk about the book, we're gonna have fun, and it's gonna be great. I have to note that when I was making this, I did see that Carrie Conread, who had done the SJM books, which I loved her recaps of, I saw that she did The Mortal Instruments. I haven't watched her videos yet because I wanted to make this kind of like on its own. I wanted to make sure that I was giving all of my own takes and sort of staying within myself to make this, but I'm so excited to watch her videos. When I saw that she had done The Mortal Instruments, I thought about not posting this because I know that she nailed it. I haven't even seen it yet. I'm positive that she nailed it. I love her videos. But I know with a book like this, there's so much to discuss that it really is the more the merrier when it comes to discussion on it. So I wanted to acknowledge Mike's and Carrie Conread for all of the inspiration. I also wanted to acknowledge that I got a lot of the information from Shadowhunters fandom wiki. I will link that below. I love this series so much. I have always loved it, so near and dear to my heart. I'm gonna take you through the wall now. I wanted the photos up for everyone, and then I wanted a string system where the strings were visually representing something. The system that I came up with is that the black strings are any interaction. These characters have interacted in any way. Phone call, they've been in the same room. Letters, whatever it is, they've interacted. When the video starts and I start going through it, there are no spoilers on the wall. I put them up as we go because I didn't want to spoil anything, but then I had to film this and explain what the wall is. So just try to not look too hard at the wall right now, okay? Just try to avert your eyes for the most part, but I'm just gonna take you through the string colors. This one is safe, Robert and Maris. We will discuss who they are later. They have a red string because they are married. So a red string is going to show any romantic relationship. Hooked up, dating, it's your husband or your wife, whatever it is, romantic relationship, past or present, that's the red string. The blue string is blood relation. That one's also going to be important. Again, avert your eyes from anything that looks important. Izzy and Alec Lightwood, again, we will discuss who they are when the video starts. They are brother and sister. That is a blood relation. They have a blue string. The orange string is something very specific that we will address when we get there. Now I have to explain the pictures, and I should be honest, I'm a little bit embarrassed to do that. This is my first video. This is my first attempt doing something like this. At this point, as I stand now, I have spent 4 months on this, and I'm not even done. So this has been a lot of work. I've been trying to figure a lot of things out. If you're here and you're watching, thank you so much. Please be patient with me. I really wanted to make something that was good, and I really just wanted to make something where we could have fun. So what happened with the pictures? Honestly, what it came down to is that I wasn't sure which images I was allowed to use or not use, and I'm a rule follower, and I didn't want the first thing that I did to like be flagged. So I made all of the images using AI. I am not a professional at doing this, making a video, doing this kind of thing. I'm also not a professional in AI. I pulled the actual physical character descriptions from either the book or the TV show or the movie or the comic books. I pulled it from there, and then because AI is flawed, but don't tell the computers that I feel that way because when they become our overlords, you're doing a great job. AI had some problems with stuff, so then I had to sort of tinker with each one to make them more specific. I know that this is not professional. I did my best, and so that's what happened with the photos. AI had a tough time with some of them. It gave me some truly horrendous and also very funny photos. So one thing that will happen as we're moving through is if a character is acting up and needs to get in line, I will be using the busted photo when I speak of them. You have to earn your top model headshot. If you're here, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching this. Also, I'm sorry. Let's do it. We open with Clary and Simon. Clary Frey is our main character. Here she is. Simon Lewis. They're going to an all-ages club. Clary is 15. She's about to turn 16. Simon is already 16, and it is August 2007. The entire book takes place in about 2 weeks. I'll give you the character backgrounds as we go through and they come up. Obviously, this is a YA fiction book. There are certain tropes and cliches that simply have to be included in it. The main character has to be a level of stupid to further the plot. Clary falls right into that. That being said, I really do love all of these characters, so I'm gonna make fun of them, but in a loving way. Clary Frey, short for Clarissa, she is your typical YA protagonist, okay? This is what I'm talking about. She is beautiful, but doesn't know she's beautiful. If you ask her not to do something, she's going to immediately, and with a speed you didn't know she possessed, do that thing that you've asked her not to do. I would describe her as precocious and fierce. I also want to say that she's loyal, but there are some things that happen later on in the book that make me feel like that's actually not accurate. Simon Lewis is the best friend who is in love with her, but hasn't said it yet. He is nerdy, and we know this because he wears glasses, and he talks about Star Wars. The book makes it clear that he is handsome. Clary just hasn't noticed it yet. Simon practiced archery at camp. He and Clary have known each other for a very long time. They're best friends. They do sleepovers. There's a part later on in the book that I was truly scratching my head, so confused by their behavior, but they're very close. They are basically inseparable. They're a really cute friendship. I really like them. Simon is in a band with Eric, Matt, and Kirk, although the running gag there is that they don't really play music. They just come up with different band names and change their name all the time. They are Rock Solid Panda at the beginning of this book. They have so many names. There's Sea Vegetable Conspiracy. My personal favorite is Lawn Chair Crisis. It sounds very existential. I'm into that. This picture, I don't know if I need to apologize to you or if AI needs to apologize to me. One person, AI was pretty good with that. Again, you have to tinker with each one, but AI was pretty good with that. When I said give me 3 bandmates, AI lost its mind. I realized that they look like they are not alive or human. It's fine, they're just sleeping. Don't worry about it. Eric, Matt, and Kirk, you don't really need to know information about them. They're Simon's friends. Eric has a van. Eric is dating Sheila the Thong Barbarino. That's as deep as I'll get into that one. Like I said, we open with them trying to get into Pandemonium. The middle of it is demon. Do you get that? Clary describes feeling drawn to it, and Simon is just there because he's going to go anywhere that Clary is. Clary sees a cute boy following a beautiful girl into a back room. She assumes that they're just going to hook up, but then she sees 2 boys following this girl, and one of them has a knife. So she tells Simon. Simon can't see them, doesn't know what she's talking about, but he goes to grab the bouncer and tells Clary to stay put. So what does Miss Thing do? Immediately runs after them. She goes into this back room. She sees Jace, Izzy, Alec. She sees them torturing the boy, about to kill the boy. She's freaking out. And then we have the obligatory "you can see us" scene because nobody can see them. She's not supposed to be able to see them. So they're all confused about that. But in the midst of that, she thinks that they are cold-blooded murderers currently doing a cold-blooded murder. She tries to stop them from hurting the boy, and then the boy tries to kill Jace. Jace stabs the boy that turns out to be a demon instead of a cute boy. Been there. When Jace stabs it, it disappears. They're trying to tell her that the boy was actually a demon. The demon was saying things like, "Valentine's back." Clary is freaked out. They're still trying to figure out what to do with her. Alec and Izzy are now mad because of Clary's intervention. She almost got Jace killed. Clary threatens to call the cops, and they point out that there's no body. So what are you going to tell the cops? Which is not a great defense, because if I'm Clary, it's true. It's not comforting. The bouncer and Simon walk into that back room. They can't see anything. They don't know what she's talking about. To her credit, she hops to pretty quick and is just like, "Oh yeah, silly me, I don't care," and moves along. And then she gets in the car with Simon to go home. Now it is the next morning. We are at Clary's house. She lives in a 3-story brownstone in Brooklyn. How? She lives here with her mom, Jocelyn. AI was also really confused about Jocelyn, and I do think it's funny because I tried to add bags under her eyes because she was looking too close in age to Clary, and I still think that it's not a perfect It's not great. Either way, she is a smoke show, and I love that for her. I love Jocelyn. She is an amazing artist. That's what she does for work. She is described as tall, elegant, and beautiful, whereas Clary feels clumsy, short, little. Clary describes herself as a Raggedy Ann doll, where she feels like Jocelyn is more of a Barbie. The Barbie marketing department strikes again. Jocelyn is a solid mom, good relationship with Clary. She's very overprotective of Clary, and she's very quiet about her past. There are no known family members. She doesn't really talk a lot about her past. At one point, Simon mentions tiny scars that she has on her back and sort of all over her body. Clary says, "What are you talking about? She doesn't have any scars." They can get into fights over the overprotectiveness. So obviously Blue String here, they're related. Jocelyn's husband was in the military and died in a car crash, because if you're going to be a main character in a YA book, tragedy has to have befallen at least one, preferably two of your parents. Her husband, who was Clary's dad, was named Jonathan Clark, and he died before Clary was born in this car crash. And then Jocelyn went back to her maiden name Frey, which is why Clary is Clary Frey. There's a box with Jonathan Clark's things in it. She's caught Jocelyn crying over, but again, Jocelyn doesn't really talk about it. There are pictures, there are military medals, a lock of hair, a wedding ring. It's a lock of blonde hair, I should mention that. Jocelyn loves Simon. Good for her. Again, I'm going to try not to spoil anything as we go through. Jocelyn is absolutely getting stuff done. She is gaslighting, gatekeeping, boy bossing all over the place. And I love her for that. Luke is Jocelyn's best friend, essentially. They've known each other pretty much their whole lives. Luke is described as being loyal and dependable. He wears flannels and drives a truck, so that's a personality trait. He seems like a really good parental figure. In this scene, the morning after the club events, Clary goes to Luke and starts asking him questions about seeing things that aren't there. He doesn't give her any actual information, but he does give good advice, and he has this quote, and I thought that it was a good little introduction to Luke. He says, "Clary, you're an artist like your mother. That means you see the world in ways that other people don't. It's your gift to see the beauty and the horror in ordinary things. It doesn't make you crazy, just different. There's nothing wrong with being different." I just thought that was sweet. Cozy dad vibes, you know? Clary keeps a bag of stuff at his place. On this day, Simon has invited Clary to a poetry reading. Eric is going to be performing slam poetry. Simon calls her on her home phone to invite her to this poetry reading, because this book was published in 2007. Then Jocelyn and Luke show up and they tell Clary to pack her things. The gang's going on vacation. Clary is really upset. She's been taking art classes over the summer. She also has no interest in leaving right now. Luke has a farmhouse in upstate New York that he renovated, which sounds beautiful, and I want to know if they do weddings. Clary is getting upset, so Luke pulls Jocelyn aside to kind of de-escalate things because Jocelyn is being full overprotective mode. Luke pulls her aside and they have this private fight, and Jocelyn is saying things like Bane's in Tanzania, and Luke says Clary isn't Jonathan and you have to tell her soon, something like that. The whole thing kind of gets put on ice because Simon shows up for them to go to the poetry reading. Clary leaves sort of still mid-fight with Jocelyn. As they are walking out, we meet Madame Dorothea. She is a seeress and prophetess and runs the shop out of the home. They split it with her, so she's on the bottom level, I believe. The character introductions for Madame Dorothea are permanently unbothered. I aspire to be that level of chill. Also securing the bag. In terms of the vibes, she's older, quiet, private. Clary's leaving the house. She thinks she sees someone, but then when she tries to think about it, she thinks that she just saw a cat. We get this a lot at the beginning of the book. She keeps seeing things that aren't there, and then she'll look back and her mind will sort of like write over them. They're walking and there's a little kid carrying a doll and the wings are moving on the doll, but then she looks back and it's not happening anymore. I find it important to point out that Clary has a messenger bag. If you were a YA protagonist in the early 2000s, you weren't using a backpack. You used a messenger bag. Did I have a messenger bag? Obviously. At the poetry reading, Clary gets asked if Simon is her boyfriend. I know I'm pointing like you can. It's the biggest picture. Clary gets asked if Simon is her boyfriend. It's sort of one of those scenes where she almost like thinks about it for the first time. She's like, oh, could he? Would we? She gets jealous of this girl who is asking if Simon was Clary's boyfriend because she's going to hit on him, and Clary gets kind of jealous of that. Hate to say it, but pick me energy. Simon starts confessing his feelings here, starts going into the I have a crush on someone. You know them very well, but they get cut off because Jace is there and he's laughing. Clary is ignoring all of the calls coming in from her mom. She still wants space after the fight. She still doesn't want to go on vacation. No one else can see Jace in the shop, and she still thinks that he's a murderer. She goes outside the shop to have a conversation with him, doesn't tell Simon that he's there, and he says that he's laughing because declarations of love amuse him. It is mind-boggling to me that Clary doesn't put two and two together about Simon, but whatever. Jace is trying to figure out how Clary has the sight, which is what he calls the fact that she can see them. He's checking her for runes, which we'll get into later. He wants to take her to the Institute, which is where their group lives, including Alec and Izzy. And he wants to introduce her to their tutor, Hodge, so that they can figure out what her deal is. Again, we're going to get the backstory for all of these other people soon. All that he tells her right now is that they are Shadowhunters and that they kill demons, which still doesn't make sense if you have no idea what he's talking about. He says the iconic phrase, all the stories are true. He threatens to kidnap her. Cute. Clary finally answers her mom's phone call while she's standing out with Jace, just getting more confused. And she hears a commotion and fighting and a struggle. And she says, don't come home. Call Luke. Tell him he's found me. I love you. Line goes out. Clary's freaking out. She's trying to get Jace to help her. She smashes her phone because she's in sort of a fit. So she grabs what she thinks is Jace's phone so she can keep trying to call home. But it's actually a sensor, which is a Shadowhunter tool. And because Jocelyn told her not to go home, she's going to immediately run home. She leaves Jace in her haste to go home. She's trying to use the sensor as a phone, except it's not a phone. She gets to the house. Dorothea is sitting there. Resident unbothered queen, complaining about the noise coming from the apartment, offers nothing else up. The apartment is trashed. There's no one there. And then a demon attacks her. It's talking about Valentine. This demon description, by the way, it says that it's a mix. You ready? It's a mix between an alligator and a centipede. Sorry, Mom. I will try your cell phone again. No. Clary ends up killing the demon by shoving the sensor into its mouth, and the sensor is a Shadowhunter tool, which we must keep in mind. She shoves it into his mouth, and that ends up killing the demon, but as she's now exiting the scene, the tail lashes out and whips her as it's dying. She gets knocked out. Jocelyn was so worried because Clary really does need a vacation. Clary comes to, and they're outside her apartment in the bushes with Jace. He had followed her home. He pulled her out of the apartment when she was passed out. There are cops now at the apartment from the whole kerfuffle. Clary wants to go tell the cops about everything that's happening, but Jace is saying that you can't tell the cops because you can't trust them because there are shape-shifting demons. So anybody that she talks to could be a demon, and we don't know why demons are after her or her mother to begin with. Clary is also on death's doorstep because there is Ravener poison in her veins from the tail hitting her. He's saying that she's going to die from the Ravener poison in an hour if she doesn't go back to the Institute with him. While Clary's trying to figure out what to do, and she's also about to die, there's a police officer that is a demon. So then he's like, we gotta go. And he draws a symbol on her. Again, we'll get into more of this later, but they're covered in all of these different like symbols. They look like tattoos. He puts one on her to try and get her out of there, and then she passes out. Clary wakes up in the Institute, which is where Jace has carried her to. She hears Alec and Izzy talking while she's sort of coming in and out of consciousness. I would say they're being stinkers here. They're kind of stinkers the whole book, but they're really being stinkers here because they're just casually talking about, is she still alive? You think she's gonna make it? Alec's actually a little nicer than Izzy. The interesting thing about this is obviously this is about the books and that's what we're gonna focus on. But it was interesting reading the books to be reminded of what the origin for all of these characters was, like where they started out as. I think I was so used to seeing Clary and Izzy be gal pals. It was very weird to me reading the book and being like, oh my, what? Izzy also takes some sort of cheap shot. They're trying to figure out what she is, why she has the sight. She says, well, she can't be a pixie because she's not pretty enough. Okay, go home. Izzy gives Clary new clothes because hers got ruined. She's going to go tell everyone that Clary is awake, so she tells Clary to stay put. Clary's been told to stay put, so now she has to exit the room. So she's walking around the Institute. She runs into Jace playing piano, and then he sort of gives her a tour of the Institute. The Institute is built like an old Gothic cathedral, is what it says. From the outside, there's a glamour on it. I haven't explained any of these terms yet. It looks like an old abandoned church, but it's actually this massive, huge, gorgeous Gothic structure. It can house up to 200 people. The real estate. They have Brooklyn real estate. You will come to find out they have Williamsburg real estate in this book, and they have a 200-room house in New York. Get out. Now's a good time to introduce you to Jace, I think. Jace Wayland, he is so early 2000s YA love interest. He's sarcastic, aloof, acts like he doesn't care about anything until all of a sudden he says something nice to you and then you're like, oh my God. He's obviously a good guy. We know this. He's going to have a heart of gold. He's gorgeous. He's incredibly cocky. Girls fall in love with him everywhere he goes. He has enough childhood trauma to book a therapist for the next 2,000 years. We'll get into some of that now. There's so much here. God. His mother died before he was born, and his father, Michael Wayland, who is not in the book because he is already dead, but he did go on the wall because parentage ends up being a big deal in this book. So I thought that one was important. So we've got the blood relation. Michael Wayland was his father. When Jace was 10, he saw his father die, and then the Lightwoods took him in. He grew up alone with his father and their servants in Idris. Idris is the Shadowhunters' home country. Robert and Mavis were really good friends with Michael Wayland, so when Jace died, he went to go live with them. them. It also turns out that that was the first time that he was really interacting with other kids his own age. He didn't go to school and there weren't other kids for him to play with, so he grew up pretty isolated. He, Alec, and Izzy are all very close. Alec Lightwood, Isabel Lightwood, siblings. Alec and Izzy's dad, Robert Lightwood, is Jace's godfather. Jace has killed more demons than anyone else his age. He does not like bergamot or cucumbers. Alec and Izzy. It's time for their intros. Alec and Izzy are sort of antagonists to Clary in this book. They're not villains, but they're very protective over Jace. They're both jealous of Clary in different ways now that Clary is sort of coming in and joining this. And not only do they want to keep Jace safe and protected from all of the crazy that she seems to be bringing with her, but they're also jealous of Jace's attentions in different ways that we'll get into later. They love their family, they love Jace, they're very protective of their own, and they have a lot of honor around the Shadowhunters code. Alec is very serious. He is a rule follower. He has never killed a demon before, and when Clary asks Jace about that, Jace says that it's because Alec is always protecting him and Izzy. The bow is Alec's weapon. The vibe check on Alec is that he is the guy who raises his hands and reminds the teacher to give out homework. Izzy Lightwood. I loved Izzy for such a long time. Reading these book series when I was younger, rereading them in my adult life now, having always watched the movie or the shows, like I've just always been consuming something from the TMI or Shadowhunters world. And Izzy, I've always really, really loved. Reading this first book, going back to it, I do not like Izzy in this book. She gets there by the end, but she tested my patience a lot. She is beautiful, tough, great warrior. She's one of the best Shadowhunters her age because, of course, Jace is one of the best his age and Izzy is one of the best. And they're the two that happen to be at the New York Institute when Clary gets involved. Sure, whatever. She's one of the best Shadowhunters her age. Fine. She's always wearing amazing outfits. All of her jewelry are weapons. The iconic one is a gold whip that's a bracelet. There just wasn't a way to get that in the picture where you could still see her face from far away. I couldn't get the whip in there, but I tried. There's a whole lot of women not supporting women coming from Izzy in this book. But when she gets it together, she will be rewarded with the headshot. But until then, you get busted Izzy. This is a fun fact for you. Alec and Izzy are obviously siblings. There's a lot of comments about how Jace is also part of the family, and he's like a sibling to both of them. And yet they keep making comments about Jace and Izzy. They keep calling each other sexy. Don't. Stop. It even becomes a plot point later where people are trying to figure out whether or not they have a romantic past together. The fact that that's not the worst thing when it comes to sexualizing familial relationships in this book. Oh, God. As far as the other people who live in the Institute, so there's Jace, Alec, Izzy, and then there's Robert and Maris, who are the Lightwood parents. They're married. That's what their red string is for. Max Lightwood is their younger brother. It's basically described as the Institute is like an embassy, and Robert and Maris are diplomats. They're in Idris right now, that's Shadowhunters' home country, working on peace negotiations. So they took Max with them because Max is very young. We find out that most Shadowhunter children grow up in Idris, and then when they get to the age that they're ready to go off, then they're stationed around the world. Alec and Izzy just grew up in New York because Robert and Maris are running the Institute, and then they have Hodge, who is a tutor as well. Those are the only people who live full-time at the Institute. I swear we're about to get back into it, okay? Hodge Starkweather, he is described as a kindly college professor vibe. He cares a lot about books. He cares a lot about the kids. He has a raven named Hugo. Hodge becomes a really important plot device to be constantly explaining things about the world. Hodge misses Idris a lot. He cannot go back. He can't leave the Institute, and the assumption is that there was a spell placed on him either by a warlock or a demon that he angered, and that's why he can't leave the Institute. He is super homesick for Idris. He can't even put a finger outside of a window. Church is the cat that lives at the Institute. Now that Clary is up, we have everyone together in the library. Hodge, Jace, Alec, Izzy, and Clary. They're in the library trying to figure out what is going on. Why is a demon after you, and where's your mom? Alec and Izzy are pissed off that Clary is there. There's a rule that there are no mundanes allowed in the Institute. A mundane would be any regular person. But Hodge points out that she would be allowed to be at the Institute for Sanctuary because she was attacked by a demon and her mom's missing. The overall dynamics here are that Alec and Izzy basically want no part in this. Jace is trying to help out Clary where he can. He also has his own motivations. Hodge is helping out where he can, but he can't leave the Institute. Everybody in the Shadowhunter world right now is in Idris for these peace negotiations, so they're basically the only Shadowhunters in New York right now. That was also a good plot point because otherwise it's like, why are you letting these children run around and do these things? Hodge is writing letters back and forth to the Clave to keep them informed on stuff. Clary, having woken up having a really traumatic past couple of days, her main motivations right now are, where is my mother? and what is going on with all of this stuff. But right now she's primarily just focused on finding Jocelyn. And who would it be? That's obviously priority number one. Alec, Izzy, Jace, Hodge on the Shadowhunter side of stuff, they're trying to figure out what the demon activity is, and they're also still trying to figure out what Clary is. Alec and Izzy keep putting Clary down and keep saying, oh, she's a mundane. And then Jace brings up that she's not a mundane, because the thing that he drew on her when he was trying to get her from the apartment back to the institute was a rune. And apparently, mundanes can't take runes. If she had been a mundane, it would have killed her or made her go insane, which seems like a massive violation. So she has to be a Shadowhunter because, look, she's still alive. Everyone loses it over this. It was a massive risk, inappropriate, wrong. The reason why I actually feel kind of okay about that is because she was going to die if she stayed there. So if you stay here, you're definitely going to die. But if I put this mark on you, now you have a chance of getting back. So I mean, I'm not happy about it, but I'll allow it. They're trying to figure out how Clary could be a Shadowhunter, right? Does she have Shadowhunter blood? Is one of her parents a Shadowhunter? They bring up that if one of her parents was a Shadowhunter and one of them was a mundane, they would have had to go into hiding because they wouldn't have been allowed to be together, so they would have been living in exile. Clary's still trying to get her head on straight and figure out next steps. She calls Luke from the rotary phone in the library. From the rotary phone in the ancient institute that houses the angels that kill demons. There's a rotary phone. Luke, kind, loving Luke, Daddy Luke, answers the phone, and he is reading from a book of the most hurtful things you can say to somebody that views you as a father. He says, yeah, Jocelyn who? Don't know, haven't found her. I'm not your father. Stop bothering me. Don't reach out to me again. Clary talks to Hodge one-on-one now because he can see that she's about to have a mentee bee. So he pulls everyone else out and he talks to her one-on-one. He's asking her, is there any way that your mom could be involved with the Shadowhunter world? She says there's no way. She vouches so hard for the fact that Jocelyn would never be involved with any of this. She doesn't know what they're talking about. She also is telling him about the Ravener demon at her house that attacked her and says that the Ravener was talking about Valentine. We see Hodge get freaked out by this, but we still don't know what's going on, which means now it's time. It's time for me to give you all of the world building info. I'm going to do this as quickly and efficiently as I can. I do think that it's important that we address it. Stay with me, okay? We're going to do it. It's going to be great. I am going to read the first little bit. I'm sorry. I think it's important. I'm going to read the first little bit, and then I will do more of like an overarching review of everything else, okay? Basically just the explanation of Shadowhunters. Hodge says, we are sometimes called the Nephilim. In the Bible, they were the offspring of humans and angels. The legend of the origin of Shadowhunters is that they were created more than 1,000 years ago when humans were being overrun by demon invasions from other worlds. Jonathan Shadowhunter, the first of the Nephilim, summoned the angel Raziel, who mixed some of his own blood with the blood of men in a cup and gave it to those men to drink. Those who drank the angel's blood became Shadowhunters, as did their children and their children's children. The cup thereafter was known as the Mortal Cup, though the legend may not be fact. What is true is that through the years when Shadowhunter ranks were depleted, it was always possible to create more Shadowhunters using the cup. Basically, Shadowhunters exist to kill demons. They have their own culture, their own laws, their own government, and their motto is the descent into hell is easy. The tattoos all over them are runes or marks. You draw them on or apply them with a stele, basically like a wand-looking thing. The different marks do different things, but they basically give you powers, I guess, for lack of a better word. If you put the speed rune on, you can be super fast. Those are what the runes are that are all over them. They can also glamour things. So that's what we were talking about with the Institute being glamored. Everything in the Shadowhunter world is glamored so that if a mundane looks at it, they're not going to see what's actually going on. Like when Clary saw the doll's wings moving, but then she looked back and it wasn't there. The glamour is that it's just a doll. The Covenant is their law. The Clave is all active Shadowhunters. So at 18, officially, you become a part of the Clave. And then there's the Council, which is the smaller voting body that leads the Clave. Demons come from other dimensions. It's anything that is not from this world. Their goal is to take over the planet, wipe everything out, basically like suck up all of the life force and the power. And then when you kill them, they just go back to the dimensions that they came from. There are more and more demons coming into this world, and the Shadowhunter numbers are dwindling. You're doing great. Okay, so you have the Shadowhunters that have angel blood, and then you have demons that are, for all intents and purposes, they're supposed to be all bad. You don't have a demon that's like, oh, but what if they're actually a good person? They're a demon from another dimension. The only thing they can do is seek and destroy. But then you have Downworlders. This is where it gets interesting. I had to pull out the iPad for this. Downworlders are part human, part demon hybrids, but all Downworlders have human souls. There are 4 main groups of Downworlders. You have Downworlders that are humans with a demonic disease, and then you have downworlders that have demon blood. So the icons here, for Shadowhunters, we are using the faith in the angel symbol, the angelic power rune. It looks like that, mainly just because the movie really made that like the main icon of Shadowhunters, but I guess that's close enough. The werewolf creatures have the little claw mark symbol. The vampires have the little vampire fangs because, of course, warlocks have sort of like a magic star shape, and then the demons have horns. Obviously. The downworlders with demonic diseases are werewolves and vampires. Twilight who? Werewolves, otherwise known as children of the moon, are either born human and then turned, so infected by a bite or a spell potentially, and werewolves can have children that can be werewolves. Vampires, children of the night, are humans that are turned and they can't have children, because if they did, we would end up with another Renesmee situation. Then you have warlocks and fairies. So warlocks and fairies have demon blood, which means they can use magic. That's the big difference. Warlocks, otherwise known as Lilith's children, are offspring of humans and demons, and they have warlock marks, otherwise known as demon marks, that are all different. They're unable to have children, they're immortal, and they will accept payment for magic. So some of them, if they choose, they could work with Shadowhunters. Other downworlders don't want to work with Shadowhunters because of the tension, but that's sort of their trade. Fairies are known as the fair folk, and they are believed to be descendants of demons and angels, but nobody knows for sure. That would mean that they're not part human, part demon, but apparently they have human souls. There's a theory that fairies are fallen angels who were cast out of heaven. There's another one that they are the offspring of a demon parent and an angel parent, but most fairies now are just offspring of other fairies. The legend is so old at this point that no one really knows. The dynamic between Shadowhunters and downworlders is interesting because Shadowhunters go after demons, but not downworlders unless the downworlder is breaking the law, killing humans. The Shadowhunters' role is to protect humans, and downworlders are part of the human race, but there's still a really weird hierarchy between Shadowhunters and downworlders where the Shadowhunters think that they're better than the downworlders. The Accords are a peace treaty between Shadowhunters and downworlders that are enforced with magic that have to be signed by Shadowhunters and downworlders every 15 years to keep the magic strong. There are rules for all groups in regards to mundanes and to each other for how they're supposed to treat each other, and as long as the rules are followed, they can all live in peace. There's always been a lot of tension around the Accords. You have people on both sides that don't want to be working with the other group. Not everyone agrees. Even within the Clave and the Shadowhunter world, there are people that don't think that you should be signing the Accords. Valentine, the name that we keep hearing so much about, he ended up looking a bit like a cartoon villain. AI had a really tough time with him. I don't know. He's basically the big bad. He was a Shadowhunter who died 16 years ago. He was a bad dude, but very charming and convincing. Think like cult leader vibes. He was the leader and founder of the Circle. The Circle was a group that believed that all downworlders needed to be wiped out of existence to preserve the purity of the human race. It's such a gross sentence. The Circle was made up of Valentine and other Shadowhunters who were part of the Clave, but they ended up butting heads with the Clave and then also the Council because they didn't think that we should be signing the Accords because they didn't want to be working with downworlders. I'm using Circle for explanation purposes as I go through it. Nobody actually knows that the name of the group was called the Circle. Everything has pretty much been struck from the record. Hodge has this information, basically nobody else does. The Circle obviously wanted to tank the Accords. August 2007 when this is taking place. 16 years prior was when the Accords were last supposed to be signed. It got off schedule because of a fairy ritual. It's supposed to be every 15 years, but now it's been 16 years past the last one. That's when basically everything with this older tier of characters, your Jocelyn, Luke, Valentine, Hodge, Robert, and Mayrus, 16 years ago was when everything kind of went down for them, and now it's August 2007. Also, now it's exactly 16 years from 2007 when I'm putting this together, so meant to be. The day of the uprising is what it's called. The day the Accords were supposed to be signed, the Circle killed a whole bunch of Shadowhunters and downworlders, anyone who supported the Accords, and their goal was to get the Accords to not be signed. Hodge has an injury in his shoulder from the uprising. Valentine had stolen the Mortal Cup. The Circle is defeated. He goes home, unalives himself, his wife, which was not widely known that he had a wife, and his child, destroys the Mortal Cup. Basically, that's that. It's over. Nobody talks about it anymore. Okay? When that happened, the Clave had to officially turn against Valentine and the Circle members. The uprising united the Shadowhunters and the Downworlders because they were both anti-Circle and anti-Valentine. The Downworlders that had been upset with the Clave for how they had been treated, it's looking better now that the alternative was the Circle killing all of them. The Clave was fighting with Downworlders to try and take out the Circle because the Circle was also coming for Shadowhunters. So they ended up working together to overthrow this. They did sign the treaty. So that's pretty much the context on the world. The goal right now with with all of our goons at the Institute is that Clary is trying to find Jocelyn. Hodge and the Shadowhunter group is trying to figure out what's going on with the demons because they're the only people in town right now, and why there's talk of Valentine. Also, at this point, Clary knows too much and her mom is gone and she doesn't have a home anymore, so she's going to stay at the Institute. Hodge is going to reach out to a group called the Silent Brothers that everyone seems kind of freaked out by, but they're described as librarian and archivist. Clary and Jace go to Clary's house to pick up some stuff to see if there's anything left and to look for clues on Jocelyn. Jace leaves Alec to go with Clary. There's a lot of anger from Alec going towards Clary and just sort of a lot of jealousy of Jace now hanging out with Clary and not hanging out with Alec anymore. We also get the tidbit that Jace and Alec are parabatai. So this is why they have the orange string. That's what that is going to represent. The parabatai bond is a pair of warriors. So it's two Shadowhunters that fight together. It's a super intense bond. You pick each other and then you swear an oath. Clary asks how sure Jace was that she was a Shadowhunter before he put the rune on her, which could have killed her. He says 90%, and she slaps him for the other 10%. Violence is never okay. They get back to Clary's house. The house is completely empty, and they are attacked by a giant rabid man. It's called a Forsaken. Jace kills it. So basically, if you put runes on a mundane, they can make you go insane or kill you. Forsaken is when you go insane. You become a mindless killer, basically like roided up. Think Cocaine Bear. You die pretty quickly because your body can't handle it, but you are loyal to whoever marked you, and you could obey simple commands. So you could have an army of Forsaken if you don't need them to last long. Dorothea is there, unbothered by the Forsaken, because she seems to know everything about it. And here, Dorothea just drops massive amounts of tea. This was insane. Dorothea's mother was a warlock. Dorothea was adopted. Her mother hid from the Clave because she wouldn't have been allowed to raise Dorothea. Dorothea hates the Clave. We also find out that the Clave can curse people. And we get the saying that the law is hard, but it is the law, which is another common saying. The Clave is super strict, and we find that out here. We also find out that Dorothea's mother made the house a sanctuary. It's protected with wards. It's hidden. Downworlders can hide there. Dorothea's job is to watch and guard that place. She runs the shop, but she doesn't do real magic because she's not actually a warlock, and she charges people running from the Clave for sanctuary at the house. Dorothea reads their tea leaves. She says that Clary's is confusing and that Clary could have a block on her mind because she can't get a read. For Jace, she sees violence. He'll fall in love with the wrong person and he has an enemy. Then Dorothea has Clary do a card reading because the tea leaves were not successful. Clary recognizes that the tarot deck that Dorothea is using was a gift from Jocelyn. She painted it. The card that Clary picks is the Ace of Cups, which is the love card, and there's a cup on the card. Then Dorothea casually drops here that Jocelyn was a Shadowhunter. That's right, Jocelyn, who Clary swore would know nothing about this. Jocelyn had asked Dorothea to keep an ear out in the Downworlder gossip for Valentine, and that she picked that house because it was a sanctuary and it had a portal. The portals become important because there are only two in New York. Jocelyn and Dorothea knew what each other were, but never really talked about it, and they would do small favors for each other. Dorothea doesn't want to be involved in any Clave business or anything related to Shadowhunter business. She's just saying, leave me out of it. Again, unbothered. Clary's sad that Jocelyn found this house for them where they would be hidden, and they had a portal, so they had an escape plan, but then she didn't use it, probably because she didn't want to leave Clary, and Clary had left her mom when her mom asked her to stay home because they were fighting. So Clary decides that she's going to throw herself through the portal to see where her mother would have gone, which is not how the portal works. That's just part of being the main character. You have to throw yourself through a portal to further the plot, even though it doesn't make sense and it makes you look incredibly stupid. Clary ends up in Williamsburg by Luke's house. He has a bookshop, Garraway Books, that he lives in, and Jace followed her through the portal basically on top of her, because the way that the portal works is it takes you to where you're thinking about. If he didn't go through at the exact same time as Clary, basically on top of her, he wouldn't have been able to find where she went. Clary says that she wasn't thinking about Williamsburg. She just ended up there. And then they ran into Simon. Sweet Simon. He was looking for Clary. He went to ask Luke about it and could immediately tell that Luke was lying about it. He said, oh, she went to go be with other family, but it was this whole big deal that they don't have any living family members. And then he saw Luke packing a duffel bag with weapons. So Simon has been watching the house to try and figure out what's going on. He's been worried sick about her because everything was so weird. She ran out of the coffee shop, never got back to him. They had had the weird night at the club. Simon's been really worried about her. He didn't know where she was. And then he sees her just running around with Jace. And obviously he's jealous that she's with Jace, and then also is mad because he wanted to know that she was okay. Jace gives him space to catch up. I actually think that he's very respectful with all of this. He also doesn't stop Clary from telling him everything. She just spills the beans on the whole thing, the whole secret thing that you're not supposed to talk about, that they've kept hidden for 1,000 years. Sure, tell Simon. More the merrier. Jace's logic is that Jace has to follow the covenant, but Clary doesn't, because she doesn't have an oath to the covenant. Clary's worried telling Simon that he's gonna freak out, but he thinks it's awesome. He doesn't seem to be grasping the weight of it. Simon is just like, wow, it's just like Dungeons and Dragons, and then he and Jace bond over talking about whether or not Downworlders are super hot and sexy. Okay. Simon and Jace still hate each other. Simon is obviously jealous. Clary tells Simon that Jace saved her life, so can you please try to make nice? Then this impending love triangle break into Luke's house. There are shackles on the wall. They're trying to figure out if Luke is being tortured. There's a chakram. Jace points out that that is Hodge's weapon of choice. Clary grabs clothes from the guest room that she has there. Also, Luke has a bookstore that he lives in that's like a home with a guest room in Williamsburg and an upstate New York renovated farm. Luke has Williamsburg money. And I think later on when they talk about portaling there that he's like on the river. How rich is this man? They see a cracked photo of Luke, Jocelyn, and Clary at the house, which means that Luke has been back to the house since the attack happened. It also looks like Luke was the last one to use the portal, which is why the portal took Clary there, even though she wasn't thinking about it. Luke comes back to the shop with 2 men in tow. Clary, Jace, and Simon hide. Jace uses a rune so that the men can't see them, but that they can see the men. The Shadowhunters are wearing warlock robes, which is weird. They're calling Luke Greymark, and Luke is covered in bruises and cuts. It does seem hostile, but they're also not trying to kill each other. It still seems like they're negotiating almost. We found out that they are Pangborn and Blackwell. It's Pangborn and... We find out that they are Pangborn and Blackwell who work for Valentine. They're looking for the Mortal Cup. They think that Jocelyn hit it. We get information here. They say that Jocelyn hasn't woken up yet. Valentine is excited for the reunion with Jocelyn and asks Luke if he's jealous. And Luke, this entire conversation is like, who? Jocelyn who? Clary who? Yeah, I don't really know much about those flops, but they seem like they suck and you definitely shouldn't follow any leads regarding them. He's just downplaying everything. He says that he and Jocelyn were 2 Shadowhunters who banded together in exile, but that's all. So Jocelyn and Luke are Shadowhunters. Well, I'm about to update the wall. Don't worry. There's also a piece of information that Luke trained with Pangborn and Blackwell the day of the uprising, but Pangborn and Blackwell would have been in the circle. So that's rough. Pangborn and Blackwell are trying to make a deal with Luke. They're saying, if you give us the cup, we'll give you Jocelyn. Luke says he doesn't know where the cup is. Also, he doesn't care. He says he doesn't want to be involved, but he's not going to stand in Valentine's way. Luke also says that he's leaving to lay low. Pangborn and Blackwell imply that he's a monster, and then they all leave. When the men leave, Jace looks up and says, those are the men that killed my father. This was so much like the Brooklyn Nine-Nine cold open. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's him. That's the man who killed my brother. So Pangborn and Blackwell killed Jace's father. Valentine, by extension, killed Jace's father. He's the one who's behind it. So Clary, Jace, and Simon all go back to the Institute. Jace is in a mood. Clary fought for Simon to stick with them back to the Institute. I guess Jace just like gives in. Clary gives Simon a chance to bail with being overwhelmed. He says he's gonna stay with her. And Clary is still just, I want to find my mom. Jace my best shot at this point. Valentine has Jocelyn and he's who we're up against. And now Jace knows that Valentine is the one who's responsible for his father's death. He's also invested in this like mission now too. When they get back to the Institute with Simon, they run into Isabel. She is cooking soup. Chapter 55, girlies. Do I have your attention? She's a terrible cook. Simon immediately gets goo-goo eyes over Izzy, and everyone at the Institute is mad that Simon, who's another mundane, is here. It's also super weird to me that Jace was okay with this. The other people are angry about it, but they also aren't forcibly removing him. It's so weird to me because they made this huge deal about Clary being one of the only mundanes to ever be in the Institute. They didn't even want her there, but all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, bring your boy. It's cool. Jace and Simon are constantly antagonizing each other this entire book. Jace also is taking this opportunity to tease Simon because Simon has goo-goo eyes over Izzy. Jace is sort of like calling him out for it in front of the entire group and says that she's going to crush his heart. Clary's now trying to figure out if Jace and Izzy were ever an item because of the way that he's talking about it. She just asks these roundabout questions as they're walking and she goes, did she stomp on your heart? Is that what you're asking? And she goes, does she always make you dinner? Does she make you soup though? Maybe like, I don't know, in a cabin? After she's been painting all day. We don't get any real info about this. Whatever. Jace says that Clary is unsettling. Jace and Clary find Hodge. They fill him in on Dorothea, the Forsaken, Luke and Simon. They're in the greenhouse, which is a place in the Institute that reminds Hodge and Jace of home. People are obsessed with Idris. Jace doesn't tell Hodge that he saw the men that killed his father because he knows that Hodge would stop any involvement in that. Hodge has a scar on his neck. It's a red circle. It's like a twist of red wire. Hodge believes that the circle is rising again. Hodge pulls out a book. He shows them the loyalty oath of the Circle of Raziel from 20 years ago. It says, I hereby render unconditional obedience to the Circle and its principles. I will be ready to risk my life at any time for the Circle in order to preserve the purity of the bloodlines of Idris and for the mortal world with whose safety we are charged. Like we were saying, the name the Circle has been wiped from all Shadowhunters history. People know about the day of the uprising, but not the name the Circle, and definitely not the book that Hodge has. All trace of this has been completely removed from any records because of embarrassment to the Clave. So how does Hodge know? Because Hodge was in the Circle with Clary's mother. Hodge says that, well, Jocelyn wouldn't have had a choice in being in the Circle or not because she was married to Valentine. The reason why Hodge didn't put the pieces together earlier is because Clary was so convinced that her mother knew nothing about the Shadowhunter world and wouldn't have been a part of this. She also changed her name to Frey because she is originally Jocelyn Fairchild. We got to do this now. I'm actually really proud of those name reveals. What did I tell you about the wall? All of the circle members now have their little red circle mark. I added a note on this chart to show the difference between clave members and circle members because I think that can get kind of confusing. The clave is all Shadowhunters. It's just the official group of all adult Shadowhunters. The circle is the rebel group led by Valentine that broke away. So the circle is Shadowhunters, but it's this rebel group of Shadowhunters, and for all intents and purposes, it's the villain group. So clave is all Shadowhunters, circle bad rebel Shadowhunters led by Valentine. Jocelyn Frey is actually Jocelyn Fairchild, who is a Shadowhunter. Luke is actually Lucian Greymark, also a Shadowhunter. Clary would have Shadowhunter blood, so that makes her a Shadowhunter even though she hasn't been raised like one. And I should do her name card as well because she is actually Clary Fairchild. The circle members were Valentine, Jocelyn, Luke, Lucian Greymark, Michael Wayland, Jace's father, Hodge, Pangborn, Blackwell, and then the Lightwoods, Robert and Mayrus. Hodge says that some people did leave when Valentine got extreme. Luke was the first one, and then Michael Wayland left. Pangborn, Blackwell, the Lightwoods, and Hodge stayed loyal. Hodge says that he only stayed because he was scared. After the uprising, Hodge and the Lightwoods basically made a deal with the clave that they would snitch on the circle, and that way they could stay in the clave, but they were still punished, which is why the Lightwoods are running the New York Institute. Basically, they got banished to New York. Hodge can't leave the Institute at all. That's where the curse came from. It was the clave for his involvement in the circle. The Lightwoods, Robert and Mayrus, they can leave the Institute. They can even go back to Idris. They're there now for the peace negotiations, but they can't live there and they're not in high standing with the clave. It's still a demerit for them to be stuck in the New York Institute. And apparently they were higher up in the clave. Their deal was obviously better than Hodge's. And then also they received more clemency because they were married with a kid. I don't know why that gives you the right to not be punished, but whatever. Hodge also has officially sent for these Silent Brothers. Everyone is creeped out by them. We get dinner scene now. The whole gang is having dinner. We got Hodge, Clary, Jace, Alec, Izzy, and Simon. Everyone's discussing. Jace is making jokes about Izzy's cooking. Izzy says that Jace is a terrible liar. Clary pulls Izzy aside at one point and is talking to her, and she says, is Jace actually a terrible liar? And Izzy says no, because he'll never lie to you. He'll tell you horrible truths, and you should only ever ask him something if you can take what the answer is going to be. Everyone is pretty much caught up now, except Hodge doesn't know Jace saw Pangborn and Blackwell who killed his father, and Izzy and Alec are not told about their parents' involvement with the circle. Izzy thinks it's romantic that Valentine is back from the dead and wants to be with Jocelyn. Hodge reminds Izzy that Valentine, let me just read this, set Shadowhunter against Downworlder and made the Glass City streets run with blood. Izzy thinks the evil thing is kind of hot. And at this point, I'm starting to realize that I could probably guess Izzy's entire Kindle Unlimited library. I'm not judging. By the way, the Glass City is basically the Shadowhunter capital. It's where all of these things are going down. It's the capital of Idris. It's Alicante. Valentine's plan was to make all humans drink from the Mortal Cup because most of them wouldn't survive. They estimate that it's about 20% that can survive the transition because you either have to be trained for it or you have to have special skills, and it's called the Ascension because you would be ascending from mundane human to Shadowhunter, and then you would take the 20% that survived and you'd have a thriving Shadowhunter race. He believed that humans needed to repay Shadowhunters for the sacrifice that the Shadowhunters make by having protected the humans for 1,000 years. Hodge says that Valentine would sacrifice his own son for the cause, at which point the crew goes, he had a son? And Hodge says, no, I meant metaphorically. The clave is obviously going to stop Valentine from getting the cup now that the cup has gone missing. They're going to try and sweep everything under the rug. They don't want anything getting out. And it's another embarrassment for them because they thought that Valentine was dead. Valentine and Jocelyn made headlines for being not alive anymore after the fire, but it wasn't true. They are both alive. Clary wants to find the cup to use it to lure Valentine to locate where her mother is. Hodge tells him to let the clave handle it. Agreed. These are children. So the ages is that Clary, almost 16, Simon is 16, Jace, it's a little busted. I spent so much time looking at a timeline of this. He is described as his birthday being January of 1991, where Clary was obviously August of 1991, because it's 2007 now, and she's turning 16 in August. The birthdays stop mattering if people end up not being who you think they are. If you think someone is someone who was born on a certain date, but then they turn out to be someone else, that birthday isn't theirs anymore. I think that they even reference him being 17 or close to 17. I think he should be 16 in this book. I think case closed, we're saying that he's 16. Alec is 17 and Izzy is 16. So it's, all 16, 17-year-olds. Not taking down Valentine. That's my point. Hodge tells him to let the Clave handle it. Alec is agreeing with this. He wants to protect Jace. Everyone's gone in Idris, though, so they're the only people left in New York where all of this is going down. But Hodge is going to send a message to the Clave, and he says that they need to leave it alone. Jace is now pushing the next lead. They cannot do an official investigation. They don't have the authority. The Clave would tell them to stand down anyway, and Hodge is the one who's been communicating with the Clave. That might be important later. So Jace's next idea is that Clary can try to retrieve her memories. If she has a mental block, she can use the Silent Brothers to get them to get rid of the mental block, because if she can remember all of the things that she's forgetting about Jocelyn, she could know where the cup is, and technically that wouldn't be an official investigation because she has a right to her own memories. We get context on the Silent Brothers now. They are archivists and medics. They've also used the most powerful runes ever created on themselves, and it mutilates their body. So their minds are basically their superpower. They are still Shadowhunters. They can read minds, and they are the most feared of all demon hunters, Shadowhunters. They can crack your mind open. Chapter 55, girlies, are you still here? Remind you of anyone? And they can make you go absolutely crazy. Clary says, absolutely not. But Jace is really pushing it. Obviously, Jace wants to track down this lead. He's not thinking through what a big deal this is for Clary, so I don't think he's trying to be insensitive. Jace is also pushing the angle of, well, they're your memories. Don't you want to know about your life? Don't you want to know where you came from? Simon pipes up and yells at them and tells them to leave it alone and drop it because he's trying to take up for Clary, and he can tell that she's really uncomfortable with this. And then everyone basically kicks him out. They're like, you just yelled at us, which reminded us that you're still here and we'd like to fix that. So then Simon leaves. He sort of checks with Clary, like, is it okay if I leave? And she says, yeah, just go. But then Izzy walks Simon out, and then Clary gets jealous that Izzy's walking him out. Clary has a nightmare about Alicante. She's dancing with Jace and Simon. There's a mermaid. Alec and Izzy are holding hands standing there. I do appreciate that all of the dreams have meaning. Next thing Clary knows, she's being woken up by Jace. It's 5 a.m. in the morning, and there's a Silent Brother there to see her. I don't remember her ever officially agreeing. We also find out that the reason she woke up in this room and didn't know where she was is because she fell asleep in the hallway after dinner. This girl has not been given food or sleep. Could not be me. This whole thing takes place in about 2 weeks, right? She is running around constantly. She's not sleeping. She's barely eating. I think she goes like days without eating in this book. No. When she passed out, Hodge and Jace put her up in a guest room. That's where she woke up. And Jace is telling her that she just has to meet this Silent Brother, and then she can still decide if she wants to go for it or not. We meet Brother Jeremiah now. There is no personal information on him because he does not have a personality. He is not designed to have a personality. He makes no sound as he moves, and when he speaks, you hear his voice directly in your mind. His mouth looks like it's surgically sewn shut. He has like stitches on his mouth, and he has no eyes, just like indents where they are. We also get the information that the Silent Brothers don't lie. I don't know if they can't lie or if they just don't. Jace ends up getting creeped out now. This is very like, he was the one who wanted me to go to the haunted house, but now he's pissing himself. That's what this is giving. He's creeped out now and tells Clary that she doesn't have to do this. Now that Clary is actually facing the reality of this though, she says, sure, go for it. Dig around in my brain. Brother Jeremiah puts his hands on her face and starts trying to remove the block, but says that it's too powerful. They have to go to the Bone City to get it removed. They're going to have to get the whole Brotherhood involved. Jace is going to go with her, and at this point, he's putting it down that you do not have to do this if you don't want to. I think he has realized that they are creepy. Clary and Jace take a carriage to the Silent City. Bone City, Silent City, City of Bones, it's all the same. It's being glamored to look like a limo, but it's actually a horse-drawn carriage. She's hoping if the Silent Brothers get rid of the block that she will be able to see through the glamours without getting a headache. She needs a nap and a water and an aspirin and some breakfast. We get some backstory while they're in the carriage. Clary's asking Jace about him playing piano. He says that his dad made him play an instrument. Clary says, oh, your dad sounds pretty strict. And then Jace gets super defensive that his dad was actually great. He says he gave him everything he wanted. Horses, weapons, books, a hunting falcon. The falcon will come up again. But his dad taught him weapons, demonology, lore, ancient languages. Clary sees that Jace is wearing a ring that has a W on it, presumably for Wayland. We also find out that Jace never knew who was behind his father's murder. Now he knows that Valentine was behind it. We get more context on how it all went down. When he was there at the house, he was hiding because his dad told him to because they saw the men coming. Pangborn and Blackwell came in with Forsaken. I don't know how I can say this. I used scissors for the yarn for the wall. If you were to put that in between your head and your torso, it would be bad. And Jace's dad knows that now. So that happens. The blood soaked through Jace's shoes as he's sitting there watching what he couldn't move because he was so traumatized. Also, I'm a Jace apologist. I should just be honest about this right now. I'm absolutely Team Clace. Fine, I said it. Ugh, I hate that I just said that, and the next line from my notes is Jace feels his purpose is killing demons and avenging his father's murder, because it's just so cliche. We get more differentiation on demons versus downworlders now, and why all demons are evil if not all downworlders are. But the downworlders are from this world, like we talked about in part human, whereas demons are interdimensional creatures. They travel between worlds, and they only drain and destroy everything to ashes. They want the life force of this world. There are hundreds, maybe millions of worlds, and demons travel around draining the ones that they can, and also only demons can travel between the worlds. Nobody else has been able to figure it out. So the Shadowhunter numbers are dwindling, like we've been talking about. Clary asked Jace if he would still choose to be a Shadowhunter if he had the choice, and he says yes, because it's what he's good at. Also a good point to bring up that you don't really have a choice. You're born into it, and then you can run away and go into exile, but outside of that, you kind of have to do it. The New York Marble Cemetery is the Silent City. They see a statue of an angel holding the mortal cup. It's dated 1234 with the Shadowhunter motto on it, which is the descent into hell is easy. And the statue opens up to reveal steps down. The Silent City is basically this massive underground scape. Also, the 1234 is very much giving my password is 1234. They go to the level where the Shadowhunters bury their dead. There's a larger area in Idris that would be like a burial home for the Shadowhunters. There are mausoleums and marble everywhere. There are these marble arches that we find out have the ashes of Shadowhunters, because Shadowhunter blood and bone is really powerful protection against evil. There's a line that even in death, the clave serves the cause. I mean, give them a break. Also, City of Bones. Clary stands on the speaking stars. I have the speaking stick, so I get to talk. There's a soul sword. She's standing before a bunch of silent brothers, and then they start digging around in her head. So she starts getting these memories back. She gets visions of her mother hurrying her down a street, a coffin, Jocelyn hiding the JC box, Jocelyn talking to a younger Luke. Clary sees a fairy, touches it. Jocelyn freaks out, takes her back down that street that she's seen before in her head. The door says the Magnificent on it, and the wall says Magnus Bane. I am so ready to talk about Magnus Bane. We're not there quite yet. I would say he's probably the most popular character in the series from my perspective, from what I've seen, which my perspective is also going to be heavily skewed from whatever Tumblr said in between the years of 2012 to 2016. So there's that. Clary gets all these memories, and then she sort of comes to. She had passed out. She also injured her arm on the marble floor. There's a sweet moment where Jace heals her. He's been very protective of her this whole time since they're in this space. He keeps saying that he's here for her protection and he's trying to look out for her. And then the Silent Brothers still tell her that the block is so strong, only the person who put it there can remove it. At least we have some pretty good leads, because we find out that only a Warlock or a Silent Brother could have put it there. And they know that it's not a Silent Brother now, so it has to have been a Warlock. Jace wants to go to a restaurant called Takis for breakfast because he wants spaghetti for breakfast. Jace and Clary meet up with Alec and Izzy. Izzy brings Simon. It seems like they've been hanging out, and Clary keeps being like, oh yeah, I meant to call him. Forgot about that guy. Simon rings a bell. This is what I'm talking about when I said that I wanted to say that she's loyal at the beginning for the character things, but the amount of times that she just forgets that Simon exists. She's still jealous of Izzy and Simon as well. She's still giving that energy. Get out of here. Girl, go home. Also, Jace finally called Alec. I feel like in this book, one of the things that I was expecting, having watched the movie and the TV show again and then coming back to the books, is to see everyone be closer, which it makes sense. It's the first book. We have to work towards these things. But Alec and Jace are supposed to be super close, and Jace kind of seems to be ignoring Alec a lot in this book. I understand that there's a lot of stuff popping off now. It does seem like he's being kind of a bad friend, though. Alec is still pretty much avoiding Clary, not being nice to her. There's a moment where Clary sees Alec trying to talk to Jace, and Jace almost like just ignores him and like talks over him. So then Clary jumps in with the conversation to try and make it less noticeable, because she can tell that Alec's upset about it, but Alec still seems to be kind of pissy about it. We get Clary's thoughts in her head now, where she thinks about how Jace must be a hard person to care about because he's so guarded and acts like he doesn't care. This Takis restaurant, by the way, it's all downworlders. There's raw meat on the menu, and we get Kaylee, who is a waitress. I went through so many different pictures for Kaylee. I could not figure out which one we wanted to go with. The physical description, it does say her eyes are blue. That wasn't a personal choice. They don't know what type of downworlder she is. It almost seems like it's like rude to ask. Kaylee and Jace are flirting with each other. Clary and Simon are asking more information here about what the deal is with these Shadowhunters and Downworlders. They ask if Shadowhunters look down on Downworlders, and the answer is it's different. That's not a good answer when you're talking about equality. Unacceptable. They explain that downworlders are considered to be below mundanes because mundanes could in theory ascend to become shadowhunters, whereas downworlders, they would never be able to. Because of the demon part, they will never be able to take runes. The gang's defense here for why they're allowed to talk about it like this is that the downworlders don't like shadowhunters either. It's like, yeah, we don't like them, but they don't like us either. Whatever. I just think that it's a little hypocritical when the big bad is the circle. Ugh, okay, I guess it's one thing to say I don't like this thing versus I'm going to perform a mass murder. Those are different things. But I'm not seeing equality from either side. I support equality and I'm not afraid to say it. All Clary has at this point when it comes to any leads is the name Magnus Bane. Izzy conveniently has a party invitation for Magnus the Magnificent Warlock. So we have a name and we have a warlock. It's a pretty good lead. Izzy hangs out with downworlders from time to time, so she is the invitation. Alec doesn't want to go, obviously. The Clave wouldn't like this, but everyone else does, so they go. We are now back at the Institute waiting for the party that is at midnight. Alec and Jace are in the weapons room. Simon and Izzy went to the park to see fairies, and Clary goes to Hodge to get something to help her sleep. Thank God. Also, this whole thing about being mad that Simon was even in the Institute, and now Isabel's like running around New York showing him all of the downworlders. Okay. Clary's looking for Hodge in the library and she picks up the book that Hodge had read the circle motto from. When she picks the book up, a photo falls out and she sees the whole group that was in the circle as teens. And she sees Jocelyn, like teenage Jocelyn with teenage Valentine. They all look happy, normal. They look like happy teenagers, you know? Hodge pops up and is pointing out the people in the photo, which it was the circle when it was formed at its inception, which we know was 20 years ago. And then we also know now that the uprising was 16 years ago. I keep pointing out the timeline because I'm keeping track of this stuff for this project, but I think it's going to get busted. Even this book, the uprising goes from 16 years ago to 17 years ago, but the book only takes place in 2 weeks. Luke was Valentine's second in command. Claire's asking how Jocelyn ended up joining the circle. Hodge explains that the Accords have always been really divisive. Most Shadowhunters either knew someone who was hurt by a downworlder or had been hurt by a downworlder. He brings up the idea of the moral absolutism of the young, which is that things are either all good or all bad. It was too complicated to try and go on a case-by-case basis to figure out if some downworlders were good or bad. It was easier to just lump them all together. Cool motive, still murder. He points out that Valentine hated everything non-human, but he loved Jocelyn and he loved Idris. Clary asks why everyone is so horny for Idris. I'm also trying to figure this out, but they say that it's because Shadowhunters can be their truer selves with no hiding or glamour, and it's the most beautiful city in the world. Clary's asking about balls because of her dream where they were dancing at a ball, and he says that yes, there were balls every week, but because Hodge was a bookworm, he never went. It's me. He was also thinking about joining the brothers, but obviously now he would never be able to. But Jocelyn and Valentine went to the balls. Clary asks if she can keep the photo. I actually thought that that was insane. They're using rotary phones, okay? I doubt he has like an iPhone album and an iCloud. Let him have the photo. But Hodge says yes. Hodge says that the Clave responded to him, but didn't give him any info because they still don't trust him, but that there are Shadowhunters on the case working this. They're just not coming to the New York Institute in case Valentine is watching it. Okay. Hodge gives her a sleeping potion, but she spills it when she gets back to her room because Jace is on her bed looking at her sketchbook. There are flirty vibes here. Jace offers to tell her a bedtime story. I'm sorry, no. I don't have anything against bedtime stories. I don't know if that's just because I'm more of an introvert. I don't know if it's coming more from that side or the fact that I know what the bedtime story is going to be. We get the Falcon story. You ready? God, okay. Jace tells a story about a young Shadowhunter boy. I wonder who it is. Once upon a time, there was a young Shadowhunter boy whose father gave him a falcon to train. The falcon had been in the wild for a year, so it was impossible to tame. The boy basically befriends it, loves the falcon loves the boy, takes it to his father to show him, and the dad breaks the falcon's neck because the boy didn't make the falcon obedient, he made it love him. The dad says that the boy didn't tame the bird, he broke it. Dad leaves, the boy cries, and a servant comes to get the body and bury it. I mean, the childhood drama on this, man. The story's pretty long, I skipped over everything, but we do have to do this one quote. I hate it so much. Toxic masculinity. Jace says the boy never cried again, and he never forgot what he'd learned. That to love is to destroy, and that to be loved is to be the one destroyed. This is obviously horrible. Clary's like, wow, that dad sounds like he sucks pretty hard. Jace immediately defends the dad. He says, oh, he's just trying to make the son tough. It's so toxic. Clary then remembers that Jace had said that his father gave him a falcon. She does not put the pieces together quickly, this one. Before she can ask him about it and like, was that you? She falls asleep. I have in my notes, she falls asleep, Jace strokes her cheek. Okay. We then get the Izzy Clary makeover. I am so sick in these series where if you're the main character, you have to be beautiful but don't know that you're beautiful. You're the one getting dragged out to like the bar or the club or whatever it is. You have to be the one who would rather stay home and read. I'm not saying that I'm not someone who would stay home and read. I do that now. Don't put us in a box. The idea that you have to be the one who's going to stay home and you don't want to go out, and she doesn't want to wear Isabel's clothes. She's like, I don't want to wear the hot clothes. Okay, sis. Izzy wrangles her into some of these clothes. She ends up wearing like a little black dress. I own the dress that they used in the movie. Elena wore it in Vampire Diaries. Lily Collins wore it in the movie. I own that dress. I wore it to my Valentine's Day dinner with my fiance this year. And I own a messenger bag. These stories made me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Izzy is doing Clary's hair and makeup. While they're doing this, Clary has shockingly put some pieces together. She just casually asks Izzy if Alec is gay. She says it's not a big deal. I was just wondering. But Izzy freaks out and says that Clary can't tell anyone, especially Jace, because we find out that in Shadowhunter culture, it's frowned upon. There's no official rule, but you can't really be out. And Alec and Izzy's parents would disown Alec. Not to spoil anything, I think we already know from context clues that Jocelyn and Luke, whatever their relationships were with Valentine, were kind of dragged into the circle. And Hodge is saying that it started from a normal place and then it snowballed. And then everyone else ended up leaving at some point. The Lightwoods never left. They were there till the end. They did eventually snitch on the circle to get back in with the Clave, but that was only after the circle had lost. And now we find out that they're homophobic and would disown their son if he came out. These people suck. Also, the Clave sucks. But that's the issue, is that we have these characters that we will discuss what they're doing as we move along. I never liked the Clave. I don't think you're supposed to. The whole idea of the Clave and the council and the rules that they have, it's just not good. And it's such a thin line between them and the circle, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah, the Clave stopped the circle, but what are they really doing? It doesn't make them a good entity. So the Clave sucks, and that's awful. Izzy has a great outfit. All of her jewelry is actually a weapon. So jealous. So now the group, Clary, Jace, Alec, So now the whole group, Clary, Simon, Jace, Alec, Izzy, they're meeting up pre-party. Simon is pissed about Clary's outfit. Is like, you need to go change right now. But Jace thinks she looks great. He gives her a dagger with a red stone carved into the hilt. Also gorgeous. I also want to point out that one of the things that I really loved about Jace and Clary, I know that it's cheesy. I know that it's cliche. I know that it's all of these things. But I'm so team Clace all the way. And one thing that I think that you can see here is how much Jace is just believing in her 1000%. He was going to put the rune on her. He tells her that it's in her blood to handle the dagger. And then we get lines here about how Jace is basically eyeing her up and Clary is smelling Jace because he's standing so close. Don't smell people. Walking to the party now, Jace is sort of checking in with Clary. How are you feeling about everything? She's really nervous about meeting Magnus to find out about the memories because it's just so dicey. There's so much that she doesn't know. She didn't know anything about Jocelyn's secret life and all of this. And what if there's stuff in there that she would rather not know? There are these motorcycles out front of the apartment, which the gang says means vampires are near. The vampires have these bikes that run on demon energies. There are rumors that some of them can fly or go underwater. Jace is checking out one of the bikes. He's touching it. Magnus answers the door. Now we get Magnus Bane. Magnus Bane is the High Warlock of Brooklyn. His character traits would be eccentric. He loves makeup. He loves great clothes. He's also incredibly powerful. His Warlock mark are his cat eyes. Took a little bit of a break. I went for continuity with everything else. The only thing is that my fiance has returned and his bike is now back in the room that it lives. So there's a wheel that is now popped up in frame. And I'm not going to ask him to move it because this is what I did to our living room wall. To our living room wall, the main space where we welcome guests into our home and pretend that I'm not insane. So I'm not going to ask him to move the bike. We are now ready to go to Magnus Bane's party. The group shows up. Magnus is not thrilled that they're Shadowhunters, but he does let them in. It's a huge loft. It's a huge party. It is filled with downworlders. So this is one of the first times that we get to see everybody interacting on a scale like this. The party is in honor of Magnus's cat, Chairman Meow. It's for his birthday. Chairman Meow is adorable. A pun is adorable. The name and the story behind it, not adorable. It's dark. I'm not getting into it. Chairman Meow has actually run away. Izzy and Simon are dancing. Alec, Jace, and Clary tell Magnus that they need to talk to him. Magnus immediately from the jump does not want to be involved with the Clave. A vampire then comes up and says that somebody put holy water in his bike, so now it's not going to run anymore because it runs on demon energies. This was actually Jace and Alec when they were checking out the bikes before. I love a solid prank. I'm okay with it. Magnus uses his powers to get the vampire to stop talking and walk away. And I noted here that Alec laughs. And that's noteworthy because it's the first time that we've seen him laugh this entire book, and it was on page 223. Magnus's whole vibe here is just not getting involved with the downworld drama or the Clave, which is fair. Jace threatens him with the Silent Brothers. This is not an official Clave investigation. Yes, you want to get Clary's memories back. If Magnus was the one who took them, that's obviously an issue and a violation. However, this is not official Clave business, and you're kind of insinuating that it is, which is absolutely an abuse of power. That's an abuse of the badge, for sure. I don't like it. Clary, Jace, and Alec follow Magnus into his bedroom where they're going to have this conversation. Magnus is doing pretty well for himself. Magnus is playing dumb this whole time, saying that he has no idea what they're talking about, what they want from him. They tell him that they saw his name in Clary's memories and that her memories have been wiped. And then he admits that it was him because he couldn't help but sign his name in her mind because he did such a good job on the spell that he did to bury the memories. It's kind of great. When Clary was born, Jocelyn was initially hoping that Clary would be born without the sight, which would be the ability to see the shadow world. When Clary was about 2, she was playing with a pixie, and Jocelyn realized that she had the sight, could see the shadow world, and takes her to Magnus. They couldn't make Clary blind of the sight, as in take it away forever, because it could make her insane. Thanks for not doing that. Magnus takes the time here to let us know that Jocelyn is a bad bitch. Like, not crying about the situation, not getting upset, just doing the next thing. If there's one thing Jocelyn's gonna do, it's just get shit done. I didn't need Magnus to tell me that she was a bad bitch, but I do appreciate it. Magnus explained the only option was to have Clary forget everything as she saw it. She would have to come in every 2 years to like reamp the spell to get it to keep working, otherwise it would fade over time. So we find out that Magnus has seen Clary every 2 years since she was 2, and he's watched her grow up. She's the only child that he's watched grown up this way because he doesn't spend a lot of time with human children. I think this is kind of cool because, no spoilers, this is way more believable to me that Magnus actually would be emotionally invested in her because he's known her for so long and has come to care about her in a way. So when the crew calls on him from time to time, it becomes a lot. It makes sense to me that he would want to help out because he is invested in that way. We found out that Clary was due for another spell about a month ago. So the fight with Luke and Jocelyn at the beginning of the story where Jocelyn is saying Bane is in Tanzania and Clary had talked to Luke about seeing things that weren't there. They could tell their memories were coming back and knew that they needed to do a spell again, but Bane was out of town. Clary also remembers here that he was the one that she saw when she was leaving the apartment to go to the poetry reading with Simon, and she saw something and then her mind immediately wrote over it and she thought that she saw her neighbor's cat. It was Magnus, and her mind with the spell made it into a cat because she could remember the cat eyes that he had. Magnus says that he cannot reverse the spell. The spell was so intricate, if he makes even the smallest mistake unraveling it, her mind could be damaged forever, but it's already begun to fade, and the effects will vanish over time on their own. Now, he doesn't know if she's gonna get all of her memories back at once, if they'll trickle back slowly in, or if she'll never get all of them back. Not the answer that I would be hoping for. However, she is in a better place now because they're not going to keep doing the spell, so now she'll be able to remember things as she sees them, and eventually that won't be an issue. Clary talks here about how she always felt different and now she knows why. Magnus points out that every teen thinks that they were meant for more than their lives and wants to be different, but different isn't always better, and that Jocelyn was just trying to protect her. That's interesting to me because the whole point of all of these stories is that the main character is the one special chosen one. So it feels weird to have Magnus call it out like this, but I think that it might just be a precursor to him sharing his story. Magnus' story starts with the fact that he was born with the Warlock's mark, which is his cat eyes, also a lack of a belly button. It's not relevant, but now we both know. Remember that Warlocks have to have a demon parent and a human parent, and Magnus' mom had him, which means that a demon was actually his father and not the father his mom was married to. So we find out that his father would flinch at the sight of him, and his mother... I gotta figure out how to say this too. His mother, who at one point was an alive person, took it into her own hands to be the opposite of that. We find out that she did this because of whatever happened. We don't know what the situation is with how the birth happened, but it clearly destroyed their family. When Magnus was 10, his father tried to drown him because Magnus wasn't his son and was actually the son of a demon, which is kind of rough. Don't drown your kids. Magnus ends up burning his dad and killing him. Now, I think in the book, the way that this was written, it says something to the effect of, he lashed out and burned his dad. I wouldn't say that that's lashing out. I would say that that's self-defense. Magnus ends up going to the Silent Brothers for sanctuary, and they hid him. When he found out he was only half human, he hated himself. Magnus pulls out the Book of the Grey. It's also referred to as the Grey Book in this. Grey is actually short for grammary. You'd think it would be like Book of Gra, but Whatever, I didn't write it. Alec says that Hodge has one too. It turns out that the Grey Book has every rune the angel Raziel wrote in the original Book of the Covenant, and there aren't many copies of it because it has to be specifically made because some of the runes are so powerful they would burn through the book. Magnus has Clary look through some of the runes. He has her look at the rune for remembrance and understanding. This is to try and help open her mind. She can't read all of them or she'll get a headache. She starts trying to learn everything. Shadowhunter kids typically will learn one at a time over several years, so they don't want her to try and look at all of them. Then they start asking about the Mortal Cup, and Magnus is confused because he says that he doesn't remember seeing anything about the Mortal Cup in Clary's memories. Context on the mortal instruments now. There are 3 mortal instruments, and these are the 3 items that the angel gave to the first Shadowhunters. There's the Mortal Cup, which we know about, which is the one that can make more Shadowhunters. There's the Mortal Sword, which is actually the soul sword that the Silent Brothers have in the Silent City. Then there's the Mortal Mirror. The cup and the mirror were both in Idris. The cup obviously was stolen by Valentine and then potentially stolen and hidden by Jocelyn, but we still don't have confirmation. And then nobody knows where the mirror has been for a while. It's just been lost to time. Magnus says that only a fool would get in the way of Valentine and what he wants. He's got 3 of them right here. It turns out Magnus was actually at the uprising as well, and he says that he killed a number of your folk when he's speaking to the kids. Jay says, well, those were circle members, those weren't our own. And Magnus makes a comment that I'm paraphrasing, but he says, if you insist on disavowing the ugly parts of what you do, you'll never learn. Which, again, I think is a really good point. I think you have all of these people acting like they're better than the circle. Show me. Show me. If you're better, show me. Magnus is implying that the circle members were still Shadowhunters and that the Shadowhunters do similar things, which is true. Jace asks Magnus if Magnus will help him find the Mortal Cup. Magnus essentially says that he wouldn't even if he could, but also he can't because he has no idea where it is. Magnus points out that if push came to shove and he had to pick a side, he would pick the Clave over Valentine because obviously Valentine in the circle would kill all Downworlders, whereas even though he doesn't love the Clave and the Clave is still not fair, at least that way they want to be murdered, but at this point he just doesn't want to get involved. Jace gets pissed. Alec tells him to let it go. Magnus kicks him out of his bedroom. They go to find Izzy and Simon. Izzy is drunk and Simon is a rat now. 1 second. Turns out Izzy and Simon were partying, there was a drink, and Simon was expressly told not to drink it, but he still does, and it turned him into a rat. Clary goes absolutely mental over this. She calls Izzy a bitch, which I think is the firmest that we've seen Clary be this entire book. She also doesn't think that Alec and Jace are taking it seriously enough because they're still kind of laughing and joking about it. Magnus says the spell will fade over time and it'll turn back in a few hours, but if they do more magic on him now, it's just more magic on Simon's system, and he already isn't used to magic, so you should just let it fade with time. Clary puts Simon in her backpack for safekeeping because she doesn't want to lose him and she doesn't know where else to put him. Clary also scolds Rat Simon for being shallow because she's assuming that Simon drank the drink to try to impress Izzy. I just think now's not the time to be scolding him. He's probably going through a lot. There's an angry mob of vampires now saying that their bikes are vandalized and that they're missing some of their friends. Apparently they turn into bats and piles of dust when they drink. The angry mob is growing. They're angry at Magnus. Magnus tells them that they shouldn't have to worry about it because none of the werewolves were invited, and the vampires and the werewolves have really, really strong beef with each other. So he says, don't worry about it because the werewolves aren't here. I'm sure it's fine. Who knows who vandalized the bikes, but in terms of missing friends, I'm sure that they just turned into bats or piles of dust and that they'll turn up tomorrow. But Magnus does shut the whole party down at this point. A vampire comes up and asks Clary what's in her bag, but Jace gets him to back off. The group's on the way out, and Magnus tells them that it was not a pleasure to meet them, but then winks at Alec and tells him to call him. Alec obviously seems really thrown off by this. Magnus gives Clary some one-on-one advice, sort of as she's walking out. He gets her one-on-one and brings up that Jocelyn didn't want Clary to be a part of this world. Jocelyn wouldn't even want Clary to try to save Jocelyn's life if it meant that Clary would risk hers in any way. He tells Clary not to make Jocelyn's sacrifices for nothing, and then he also reminds Clary who Jocelyn was running from, that it wasn't the Downworlders, it wasn't the demons, it was Shadowhunters. Clary, Jace, Alec, Izzy, and Rat Simon are all leaving the party. Alec is comforting Izzy, who is now drunk, sobbing, and feels really bad. Izzy is pushing Alec about Magnus also, but Alec is sort of shutting it down and looking wistfully at Jace. Clary goes to check on Rat Simon in her bag, and he's gone. Jace tells Alec and Izzy to go on ahead. Keep walking home. Clary and I are going to catch up with you guys later. We see here that Alec feels kind of alienated by this, which is fair. I still don't know why Jace didn't ask him to come with them. They have to go look for the rat now, and I feel like you should assume that there's going to be danger. Jace and Clary go back to Magnus. I have notes here that Jace is actually being really nice and supportive here. Clary asks Jace if she thinks that Simon is all right, and we get a throwback in her POV to when Izzy was saying that you should only ask Jace something that you want the answer to because he's always going to give it to you straight, and Jace doesn't answer her question here, assuming that he doesn't know if Simon is going to be all right, but he still doesn't want to hurt her. I thought that was cute because I'm Team Clace and I read this book when I was in my formative years. So yeah, Chairman Meow has returned to Magnus, which is how he ended up with a spot on this wall and how I ended up having to figure out which character would have interacted with him. Jace and Clary are questioning Magnus about the rat. Magnus says that he saw a vampire leaving with the rat, but he assumed that it was one of their own. It was another vampire that had turned into a rat, or maybe they thought it was a Shadowhunter's pet rat and wanted to kill it because they knew that there had been Shadowhunters at the party. This is another sign of how bad the relations are between Shadowhunters and Downworlders. They point out here that there's no laws against killing the Shadowhunters' pets, and it's just awful. Magnus again doesn't want to get involved. What if the vampires find out that he had taken the Shadowhunter side in this matter? Clary says that Simon's gonna die if Magnus doesn't help him, and Magnus says, they all die, dear. You might as well get used to it. Because remember that Magnus is immortal. He's been around a long time. He's seen some shit. Clary, smart girl that she is, guilts him over the whole you stole my memories for 14 years thing. She gets Magnus to tell her where the vampire's lair is. The vampire's lair is at Hotel Dumont. Clary asks if there's a portal, but it turns out that there's only 2 portals in New York. Apparently they're pretty risky because bad things can come through the portal if they're not warded properly. The only 2 in New York are Dorothea's and Renwick's. We don't know what Renwick's is at this point. Jace asks for the nearest holy place, and he's pointed to a Catholic church nearby. Everything's locked, but Jace calls upon the angel, and they get into the church. Clary's spooked out here. She doesn't want to be breaking into a church. We also find out that it's her first time being in a church, so she's spooked out for that reason. Also, why are we breaking into a church right now? Jace explains that demons have been on Earth as long as humans have, and most religions have incorporated the fight against demons into their belief system. Shadowhunters don't subscribe to any one religion, so all of the religions in turn help the Shadowhunters in the fight against the demons. So there are people in the religions that know that demons are real, and they're also helping aid the fight. It's just that most people don't know about it. So there are holy places all over the world of all religions that have hidden weapons and tools and resources that Shadowhunters can use if they ever need them. Jace doesn't believe in angels or God, and I bring this up because there's a really, really great quote. I love it. Clary thinks that it's weird that he doesn't believe in angels or God, because if demons exist, why wouldn't angels? And the story of the Shadowhunters' origins says that the angel Raziel gave them the angel blood in the first place to create them. Jace says that he's killed over 500 demons. That is a staggeringly high number. Bonkers. I wanted to add kill count to the wall, and maybe I will. It's just that we don't get specific numbers on everything, but man. So Jace is, again, for all intents and purposes, with our timeline, the one true timeline, that would make Jace 16. He's not even an official Clave member yet. You would be an official Clave member at 18. You really, I don't think, would be out doing missions by yourself. Let's say you started getting hands-on experience at 13 or 14. So you've been shadow hunting for 3 or 4 years. You're killing over 100 demons a year. Every 3 nights about, you're killing a demon. When do you sleep? Anyway, Jace has killed over 500 demons, and he's never seen an angel or knows anyone who has. Clary is pushing him here because she also says that she's never really thought about it and doesn't really have an opinion either way, but she is pushing Jace because she wants Jace to care about anything and just to not act like he doesn't care all of the time. Jace says, my father believed in a righteous God. Deus Vult, that was his motto, because God wills it. It was the Crusaders' motto, and they went out to battle and were slaughtered, just like my father. And when I saw him lying dead in a pool of his own blood, I knew then that I hadn't stopped believing in God. I had just stopped believing God cared. There might be a God, Clary, and there might not be, but I don't think it matters. Either way, we're on our own. That is literature. Jace said, you're on your own, kid. They get to the Hotel Dumont. Someone has put an R over the sign for Hotel Dumont, Hotel of Death. Clever. The vampires fly, so the way that the vampires enter is getting in through the roof, so Jace and Clary have to break in through one of the lower floors. They're looking for an old servant's entrance. There are bones in the alley of bones. A boy interrupts them. This boy is Raphael. Raphael is trying to get them to leave the hotel, trying to warn them away. Jace shows that he is armed and is asking Raphael if the vampires are paying him to keep people away. Jace thinks that he's a mundane, that the vampires have gotten to work for them in some way, and maybe he doesn't really understand what's going on. And Raphael says, bro, everybody knows that they're vampires. They're screaming at night. Animals keep disappearing. It's very clear that there are vampires here, but what are we going to do? Call the cops? He also says that a group of boys went into the hotel a while ago to try and kill them to basically, save the neighborhood, but they never returned, and that one of the boys was Raphael's brother, so he's trying to keep people away because he's lost someone to the vampires. Clary says that her friend's inside, so she has to go in. I mean, is your friend inside, or is an adorable little rat inside? Jay says that he's killed vampires before. Raphael shouldn't worry about it. Raphael's actually heard about Shadowhunters and wants to go inside with them and help them. They obviously say no, we're not going to be responsible for you. He does show them the entrance for how to get inside, and they have to drop down, and he ends up following in after them. So at that point, he can't get out by himself, so now they have to protect him. They're looking around, it's very scary, and then Jace throws his dagger into Raphael's chest. They're fighting, Raphael is impaled, but not dead, and this is where we find out that Raphael is a vampire. I did love the way that this was written, where they're exploring the hotel. They're trying not to wake up any other vampires. They're also breaking the accords by trespassing on the vampire's lair, and it's already a heightened situation. And then Jace just yeets this dagger into Raphael's chest, and Clary's very confused. Jace guessed in the alleyway because Raphael had a scar from a cross necklace. Every single vampire media, the rules are like a little bit different. One of the rules that is the same in this one is you can't take the Lord's name in vain, and if you have a cross or something like that, it'll burn you. Also, Raphael wasn't leaving marks in the dust as he walked, which Jace noted. I do appreciate that Jace is supposed to be this incredible Shadowhunter and amazing. And he does pretty well in the book. We get these scenes that actually do show that he's very good at what he does and that he is very smart. They're all in a ballroom now. Raphael is still alive. The dagger didn't kill him because he is a vampire. The vampires are all awake. So Jason's using Raphael as a hostage, holding him at knife point while he's trying to talk to the vampires. They're negotiating for Simon back in return for Raphael. We meet Jacob. Jacob has a steak earring. That was like one thing that the book gave me for physical descriptions. So I gave him a little steak earring. There you go, Jakey. Jacob was the one who had bumped into Clary at the party, was asking her what was in her bag. We also meet Lily and Elliot. So these are all vampires that are part of the New York clan. It turns out one of the vampires had taken Simon home, genuinely thinking that he was actually one of the vampires. The leader of the New York vampire clan is an Idris for the Accord, so Raphael is leading in their stead. Jason and Clary have no trespass on the vampire's lair, which means that they're not protected by the Covenant, so the vampires can kill them now. It's a really dangerous situation, and it's an incredibly dumb plan, and I was just talking about how good Jace actually was in these situations, so I'm sorry. That's my bad. The vampires are smart. They want Jason and Clary to swear that they won't harm Raphael even after they get Simon back. I don't know if we've found this out or not before, but promises are a really big deal in Shadowhunter culture. If you make an oath on the angel, you can't break it. Even if you wanted to, even if you try, you're bound forever to that promise. Clary, not an official Shadowhunter. Again, she has Shadowhunter blood, but she was not raised in the Clave. She has not had any Shadowhunter training. She is not bound to the angel in any way if she were to make an oath on it. So Clary says, sure, yeah, I'll promise you. I'll swear right now. I'll swear up and down. All over here. The vampires say, thanks, but that's meaningless, and they want Jace to swear, and Jace refuses to do it. And we find out this tea amongst the Downworlders. Raphael is saying that all of the Downworlders know that Valentine is back. With Valentine back, it means that the Accords aren't going to happen. The Downworlders are assuming the Accords aren't going to happen, and that they won't be subject to the Covenant's laws soon anyway. It's basically going to be an all-out war, and Raphael straight up says that he's going to kill Jace. And now, from the same mind that brought you jumping into a portal when you have no idea how it works or where you'll end up or whether or not it'll kill you, we have the girl who just grabs the rat and makes a run for it in the middle of a vampire lair. It's incredibly stupid. It does end up working out, so we're gonna give it to her. She grabs Rat Simon and she just makes a run for it. Everyone's fighting now. Rat Simon actually bites Raphael at one point to help Clary and Jace. Simon does really well in these books. We're gonna get to it more later. He holds his own. I'm proud of him. The bite from Rat Simon actually does hold Raphael back for a second. Jace, Clary, and Rat Simon all get backed into a corner. There's no way out. They're surrounded by vampires. Jace is holding them back with the light from his blade. So the holy weapons that they have can hold them back, but these three are still absolutely screwed. Until a whole bunch of werewolves crash through the window. For the werewolves who have mad beef with the vampires to break into their lair, all out open like this, just come crashing through, it's a huge, huge deal. The Covenant obviously forbids them from coming to each other's lairs so that they wouldn't be fighting like this, and the werewolves explain that they're there for Clary. What did you do? The vampires don't want to give Clary up to the werewolves because Clary trespassed, so they think that they should get to decide what happens to her now. And then the werewolves and the vampires start fighting. Actually great news for our gang that can now try and escape. Rat Simon, again, coming in to be helpful, leads them to a door to get out while the werewolves and vampires are all fighting with each other. A werewolf is coming after Clary at this point, realizing that they're escaping, and she throws the dagger that Jace gave her. Remember that it was a dagger with the red stone for the hilt? She throws the dagger at the werewolf and then essentially loses it because it's currently inside of a werewolf, and she's not going to go back for it. Clary, Jace, and Rat Simon make it to the roof. The vampires and the werewolves make it to the roof after them. At this point, there's still nowhere to go. And we get Clary's POV here while she starts picturing a rune or a mark. It's like an instinct that's just coming to her mind. Before anything comes of that, though, because you have to save that for the final act, Jace has them hop on a bike, remember the demon energy motorcycles, and then he drives it off the roof, and it does fly. He didn't know that it would fly, but it did. It's a cool move. It's poorly thought out because it is almost sunrise, and the bike runs on demon energy, so as soon as the sun comes up, it'll stop running. Jace is trying to safely crash land them, essentially. He does pretty well. Everyone gets injured. They do crash land in a parking lot. Jace runs to Clary to check on her, but Rat Simon is now back in human form, and we all lament the fact that Rat Simon has to leave the wall now. And while Jace is trying to make his way over to check in on Clary, human Simon now and Clary are embracing each other and having this super sweet reunion. And we get a line here that I've always really loved, and it says that Jace turns away as if the brightness of the rising sun hurt his eyes when he's sort of staring at their sweet reunion. I'm obsessed with that line, again, probably just because Tumblr went absolutely apeshit for it. Clary, Jace, and non-Rat Simon get back to the Institute. Jace and Simon have to go to the infirmary. Jace is pretty banged up, Simon is pretty banged up, and then also they have to check on him because turning from a rat back to a human. Clary has an arm injury, but Hodge fixes it and then she's kind of good to go. Hodge and Alan are looking at Jace like he was Jake Gyllenhaal after the All Too Well 10-minute video came out, okay? Jace is in hot, hot water right now. The tensions are pretty high in this group now. Clary goes to check on the boys. Simon tells Clary that they need to talk, so she tells him to come to her room when he's done getting checked out, and then he kisses her on the cheek like it's something that they do all of the time. And I'm only noting that because the book points out that everyone sort of side-eyes that situation. Like, what, did you just... before you left. Clary, again, who was bound to the roles of being a YA protagonist, much to her detriment, assumed that Simon is just trying to get Izzy's attention with kissing her on the cheek. As Clary is leaving, Alec follows after her, and they get into a really big fight. Alec is clearly really protective of Jace. He feels like Clary has come in and messed everything up, so he is really hard on her. He tells her to leave. He tells her that she put Jace in danger, and that Jace will kill himself trying to save the world. And Alec is worried sometimes that maybe that's what Jace wants, just with how reckless he is. And Alec tells Clary that she shouldn't be encouraging it. Clary correctly points out that this entire thing was Jace's idea. Alec has been feeling left out and just completely ignored this entire book. So Alec is just positively pissy. He calls Clary dead weight and a mundane. He says that Jace lost his mom and dad and that Clary could make him lose the only family that he has left if Jace were to get kicked out by the Clave for running around town, breaking the accords, doing all of these things. Clary has absolutely had it up to here. We must remember, is she eating? Is she sleeping? Her mom's gone. She thinks that Luke was lying and using them the entire time. I feel for Alec. He has a lot going on. He's feeling really bad. I also really feel for Clary. She's going through a lot. Give her a nap and some food. So this fight obviously escalates because both of them are just going at it. Clary says that Jace told her that Alec has never killed a demon because he's afraid. We know that what Jace actually said is that Alec is always busy protecting Jace and Izzy. Then Clary goes too far. I think we can all agree it's too far. Clary screams at Alec that he's only throwing a tantrum because he's in love with Jace. Which we knew, and she's not wrong. But the sensitivity of the subject material and knowing what Alec's going through, and also knowing that you're still in the Institute, you shouldn't even be saying it out loud there. The first time you brought it up, you thought it wasn't a big deal, that's fine. You shouldn't be doing this. It's really horrible. Alec obviously freaks out. He tells her to never say that again. And then Clary feels bad about it immediately in the moment, but they're beefing too hard. She's not going to walk it back yet. Clary goes to her room. She's drawing. She draws Jace with wings. She tries to draw Jocelyn, but now she sees Jocelyn in so many different lights now. It's hard for her to draw her. She can remember the scars that Simon was talking about at the beginning of the book, the little scars all over her body. Simon comes in. He's been fixed up. They're laying on her bed chatting. He's playing with her hair. This was the part that I was talking about at the beginning. They're kind of just leaning on each other for support here. Obviously, a lot of things have happened. Simon tells Clary that half of her attention is better than all of anybody else's, which is really sweet. He's talking about how much she zones out. Even before all of this happened, he said that she would always sort of be in her head and in her own world, but that he never minded because he just wanted to be around her. Clary tells Simon that she has only ever loved 3 people in her life, which is Jocelyn, Luke, and Simon. Simon is talking about something that his mother said about Clary, which isn't really relevant, but he does bring up that there was something else that his mother said about Clary, and then Clary asks about it, and he goes, oh, nothing, it's a secret. So these two absolutely platonic friends who definitely do not have feelings for each other, who are laying in bed stroking each other's hair, are discussing if Jace and Izzy have feelings for each other. Clary's still assuming that Simon is interested romantically in Izzy. Simon says that he's off Izzy now, he's over it. He also tells Clary that he drank the drink to be a part of Clary's world, not to try and impress Izzy. Because Clary's running around now and doing all of these things, and Simon, I think, wonders what his place in that is going to be, and he's basically just trying to keep up with her, so he drank the drink. Simon falls asleep here, and then Jace knocks on Clary's door. If you snooze, you lose. And that's what happens. Jace knows that her birthday is tomorrow. She's turning 16, remember? He takes her to a picnic in the greenhouse. Alec, Izzy, Hodge are all still mad at Jace. Simon is asleep in Clary's bedroom, so it's just the two of them having this picnic. Jace tells the story of for his birthday when he was 5, he took a bath in spaghetti. He said that his dad would let him do anything that he wanted to on his birthday. He talks about how he would travel all over with his dad, that he still looks up to him, but that he hasn't traveled since he died. Clary says that she was never allowed to leave the state because Jocelyn was too overprotective. And we also get her thoughts on how she's kind of mourning Jocelyn and Luke in a way. She's still looking for her mom. She still hopes that she'll find her mom alive. There's a chance that she doesn't. And then even if she does find her mom, Clary's mourning the loss of who she thought her mom was because everything was different. And then she's also mourning Luke because everything was a lie with Luke. Then midnight strikes in the greenhouse, and there are these flowers that bloom every night at midnight. So they watch that, and then he gives her a witch light as a birthday present. I love this. A witch light is basically like a flashlight, but it's a stone. It's a Shadowhunter tool, and I love that he gave it to her because it still continues to push the message that Jace is always going to include her in this Nephilim group, the Shadowhunter group, whereas a lot of people are saying, get out. Alec is actually saying, get out, you need to leave. Jace is always including her in this group, which is really what she needs right now because she feels like she's lost both of her parents. She feels like her whole life was a lie, so she doesn't fit into that life anymore. And it turns out she's a part of this one, but she's not actually being accepted here. So I thought that was really sweet. Clary finally just asked Jace flat out if he and Izzy were ever a thing. Jace says that there were times over the years where either or both of them probably considered it. He never had friends growing up. He was isolated. He didn't go to school. But that no, there was never anything romantic between them, that they were too close to brother and sister, and it would have been weird. Clary still thinks that Izzy hates her, and Jace says, well, it's just because Izzy's used to being the only girl and getting all the attention, to which I say, that's the point. That's what I'm saying, though. That's the thing that I wish that she would stop doing. Jace calls Clary beautiful. They leave the greenhouse. Clary is staring at Jace a lot. She notes in her head that she's probably making him uncomfortable with how much she's staring. At that point, stop staring. They're walking back down the steps from the greenhouse, and she tries to avoid stepping on a knife that Jace was cutting one of the apples with. And we get this real line from the book. She jerked hastily back to avoid stepping on it, the knife, and her shoulder bumped his. He put a hand out to steady her just as she turned to apologize, and then she was somehow in the circle of his arm, and he was kissing her. I hate it when that happens. I hate when I trip over a knife and then all of a sudden I'm making out with my crush. At this point, it's pretty much game on between them. They've been flirting this entire book. I mean, more so than just she's been staring at him a lot and he's been extra rude to her, which means that he likes her. Typically, I have a problem with that trope. I'm not going to get into it because this video is always going to be too long, but the whole idea that if a boy is rude to you, then it means that he likes you is something that we absolutely need to get rid of in our culture. But again, this isn't reality. We're here to have fun. And it's going to be okay. But on top of that, we also have seen them get really close. He's been protective of her. He's taken up for her. He's including her. She's dedicated. She has integrity. And they do fit very well together. So he walks her back to her room. They're standing outside. They're flirting. They're holding hands. And they're sort of playing the game of if Jace is going to come inside or not. And then Simon opens the door. Because remember, he had fallen asleep in her room. This is another one of the parts in the books she was like, oh my God, I forgot he existed. Simon opening the door, being upset and jealous, immediately kills the moment. Jace gets very jealous and very upset. You are going to be very grateful that he stopped that moment. You're going to be incredibly grateful that he stopped that moment. You're probably going to send him a fruit basket. Simon is jealous because he saw Clary and Jace standing there holding hands, acting like they were two people who had just made out because they had. And then Jace gets jealous because obviously Simon was in her bedroom. He's like, what is going on? So Clary and Jace are standing outside. Simon's inside her room. He slams the door out of anger, which while I was reading it, I was like, that's her room. Jace is then looking at Clary, I think goading her to go after Simon, but really hoping that she would stay with him and explain what's going on or try to figure it out. But she does run after Simon. Clary had downplayed it when Simon had first seen them. She said, oh, it's not what it looks like. And Jace says, how swiftly you dismiss our love, which that exact line was in the movie. I'm assuming in the book that he's trying to be sarcastic. He's just trying to be rude. He's pretending not to care about it. But in the movie, they made it seem like he was being dead serious about it. And they've known each other for 5 days. And I found it incredibly weird. Jace is acting like he doesn't care. He obviously does. She tells Jace to just say it if something's bothering him. He tells her that he doesn't care about the kiss. He doesn't care about her. And he leaves. Go to therapy. Clary and Simon are in her room now. Again, he sees a sketchpad drawing of Jace. He's just getting more pissed off. He grabs his stuff to go home. He says that he hates Jace. And then Clary gets mad at him for even having an opinion, as if it's his right. She brings up Simon's life and Simon's girlfriends, but Simon says that all of his girlfriends were just him trying to make her jealous. And again, I have to read the line from the book. Clary says, trying to make me jealous? Why would you try to do that? She saw immediately that this was the worst thing she could have asked him. This is just so on the nose, all of those TikToks and memes where it's like, I have a crush on someone. You know her really well. And you start being like, no. That's what this is. Simon finally admits to Claire that he has been in love with her for 10 years, and he wanted to know if she felt the same, which now he knows that she doesn't. This scene is legitimately heartbreaking because not one person is in the wrong. It's just affairs of the heart. I feel for Simon because obviously he has feelings for Clary. He feels like he's been obvious about it. He has been obvious about it, to be fair. He's losing his crush essentially, and I also feel really bad for Clary. She's losing Simon, and she had said that the only 3 people that she loved were Jocelyn, Luke, and Simon, and now she feels like she's lost all of them. Clary goes to stop Simon from leaving, but she's shocked, she's confused, and she can't stop him by saying, no, I actually do have feelings for you. So she doesn't know how to fix the situation. She's questioning in her head whether or not she does have feelings for Simon because she's just never thought about it. She's never viewed him that way. And she kind of just stands there as he walks out. His last line before he leaves, because this man knows how to leave a room, is he says that he'll finally tell her the secret thing that his mom had said about her that he wasn't going to tell her, and that it was that Clary would break his heart. Mom gets it. Mom knew. Clary feels horrible. She feels really bad that she didn't know. She's remembering that Jace could tell from the very beginning. She's lost all the people she loves. Jace is also saying that he doesn't care about her now, although he's clearly just being pissy. And then Clary thinks to herself that maybe losing all of the people she loves is her punishment for actually being happy with Jace tonight when her mom is still missing. That's sad. She's holding the drawing of Jace still that she had done of him as like an angel with wings that Simon had found when he came into the room. And she feels the feathers on the wings as if she's touching feathers and not the page. She had drawn runes on the page, something that just came to her like when the instinct hit. She doesn't know what they were. And that gives her an idea, but then the book switches to Jace's POV. So we don't get to find out what she's working on. I want to know if anybody ever actually touches the images of things. Like when they miss somebody, like if my fiance was out of town and I have a picture of him or something, I don't think that I would ever actually touch the photo. And people do it all of the time in movies and TV shows. Is this a thing people do? Let me know. Jason's in his room trying to sleep. They point out that his body is still super sore. I appreciate that because a lot of times in this genre, you have these crazy things happening and people are getting crazy injured, and then just the next chapter, they're walking off to do the next thing. I appreciate that they point out that this man's is injured. There's a part here about Clary not knowing that she's beautiful, and maybe that's why her beauty affected Jace and not Izzy's, and I hate it. He knows that he lashed out at her. We get this line. Words were weapons. His father had taught him that, and he'd wanted to hurt Clary more than he'd ever wanted to hurt any girl. In fact, he wasn't sure he had ever wanted to hurt a girl before. Usually he just wanted them, and then wanted them to leave him alone. These are the things that we have to ignore as Team Clays. Clary goes to show Jace what she just found out that we weren't kept in the loop for. He's being rude. We get the context in his perspective of how he wants to put his arms around her and tell her that things are all right, but he also feels like things are rarely ever all right, and then we have to remember all of his childhood trauma. I'm reading my notes and I wrote here, it's a pretty vulnerable insight that makes it easy to be a Jace apologist. I'm sorry. We find out what Clary was working on. It turns out that Clary can put objects into the page and then pull them back out of the page. Clary had used runes on the page to get this to happen, and she just assumes that this is something that a rune can do, but Jay says that there's not a rune that he knows of that can do that, and they don't know which runes she's using or where she found them. She can draw them when they come to her mind, but for the pages that you're actually using to put the objects in and out, after you draw the runes and pull the object out, the page turns to ash, so then the runes are gone. So she's not even sure what she's working with, but it works, and it's a cool trick. It's brought up that it's probably against the Clave rules somewhere to just be using runes willy-nilly, and it probably is, but you know what? I'm so done with the Clave rules. I can't believe I'm about to say this sentence. Clary has put the pieces together. That's right. She put the pieces together. She realizes that the cup that was in the tarot cards that Jocelyn had drawn for Dorothea, and just wait, because it is about to get so much better with the level of prep and thought that Jocelyn put into this. She realizes that the cup that was in the tarot cards is the actual mortal cup. Jocelyn did have it, and it's in the tarot deck. Our Lord and Savior Jocelyn gave the cup to Dorothea hidden in the deck because she knew that Dorothea would never give it away and never find out what it was, and Jocelyn could still watch over the cup from nearby. The book points out that Jace's impressed with Jocelyn at this point, and aren't we all? Clary and Jace get Alec, Izzy, and Hodge. It's first thing in the morning. Alec is out, doesn't want to be involved. Izzy is in. Clary sees how hard Alec is trying to protect Jace here, hoping that they don't get into trouble, hoping that nothing happens to them. She's thinking in her head about how Jace can't see that Alec is in love with him, but then she immediately remembers that she had no idea with Simon, and I wanted to thank her for being cognizant of that. The group is figuring out how to proceed here with our resident unbothered queen, Madame Dorothea. Remember that she doesn't trust the Clave. She wouldn't give it to the Shadowhunters even if they asked, so Clary is the only person who can get it. Clary also remembers here that Jocelyn was hiding the cup from the Clave, so that was part of it too, is Jocelyn hiding the cup from the Clave, giving it to Dorothea. Even if the Clave did find out where the cup was, or that it was hidden there, Dorothea never would have given it to the Clave. It's just, she thought of everything. We haven't even gotten to all of the things that she thought through and prepped for. The group decides that they are going to go. Clary was obviously going to go, but they're pointing out that it could be dangerous for her. She's not a shadow hunter, but she's also, again, the only person who could get it. Alex still says that he's not going to go, and Jace says if he's afraid, he can stay home. Remember the comment that Clary made to Alec that Jace thinks that Alec is a scaredy cat who's scared. So Alec immediately says, just kidding, I'll be there. They need a car because the cup is obviously priceless and they don't want to take it on the train. All of the Shadowhunters are in Idris. There's nobody else to handle this for them. Hodge can't leave the Institute, and there's still a bunch of teenagers at the end of the day. Their only option is to call Simon, who has a license, and can use Eric's van. That's right. It ended up mattering that Eric had a van. You didn't think that would be important, did you? You thought I was just naming useless facts? I told you, we're not here to play games. Clary doesn't want to call Simon and use the car at all, which is so fair because of the last time that they saw each other. They really don't have a choice here. There's so many bigger things at stake. Simon does agree because he knows how important it is for Clary. I did want to point out the goals of the different characters at this point. Clary is trying to find her mom. She agrees that Valentine sounds like a really bad dude and that Valentine shouldn't have the cup because a lot of people would die, but that's not really her main thing. Her main thing right now is to get her mom and to figure out what's going on. The Shadowhunters' main motivations are at this point, Jace wants to find the cup because he wants the glory of finding the cup. He literally says that. Alec, the Clave, will not like this Lightwood, just wants everybody to be safe and for them to wait and let the Clave handle this. Izzy just seems like she's up for whatever. If it's what people are doing, she'll be there. She's also a great warrior like Jace, so I think she kind of enjoys doing stuff like this. Also, all of the Shadowhunters are on the same page with making sure that Valentine does not get the cup and getting the cup back to the Clave. Hodge has been stopping them mostly from doing anything that they really shouldn't be allowed to do. So not launching any official investigations. For the most part, he's telling them to stay put. He doesn't do that here. He seems to agree that this is important enough that they need to go grab the cup. My issue with this, Clary wants the cup because she wants to get Valentine to come out of hiding wherever he is with Jocelyn. So Clary just wants to use the cup as bait to find out where Jocelyn is, but it doesn't make sense because either she's okay with Valentine actually ending up with the cup, which I don't think that she is because we already established that he would use it to kill 80% of the human race. So her thought process is actually, let me use the cup to get to my mom, and then either she didn't think past that step or she's assuming that her and 3 other actual children can take down the biggest bad that their people has ever seen, who poses the biggest threat to the world in the history of forever. Jocelyn wouldn't do this. Jocelyn had to be gone for the book because otherwise she would have gotten all of this handled. Everyone's getting ready to go to the house. Remember that Alec is now coming. Hodge is with Clary one-on-one while the Shadowhunters are gearing up. And Hodge is talking about love triangles and not using people, like how Clary's using Simon for the car. And Hodge says that Luke was in love with Jocelyn, which who wouldn't be? And also I think we kind of assumed because of the whole best friend thing that they have going on, and it's a YA book. So one of them has to be pining for the other one, possibly both of them. So as we suspected, Hodge says that Luke was in love with Valentine. Oh, that would have been a plot twist. So as we suspected, Hodge says that Luke was in love with Jocelyn, but Jocelyn was with Valentine, and Luke would have still done anything for Jocelyn. Hodge is saying it's possible that Luke hates Jocelyn now for years of being overlooked and not having the feelings returned. Clary kind of skates by all of this and asks Hodge how they'll get in touch with Valentine to let him know that they have the cup to get Jocelyn. Hodge says that Hugo will find Valentine. Jace is left-handed. Alec helps Jace put a rune on when they're putting all of the runes on to go out to battle. Some of the tension is cleared there. Remember that there's still a lot of weird vibes in the air. Jace asks Clary if she still has the dagger that he had given her, and she says no because it was inside of a werewolf. Simon pulls up now in the big yellow van to pick them up. It's still kind of weird between them. Simon is basically talking to the other people and kind of avoiding Clary, but they do crack a small joke together and start getting through that tension. Jace, Alec, and Izzy go to check the demon levels of the house. Remember the sensor at the beginning of the book? They're using the sensor to check the demon levels of the house to make sure that it's safe before they enter. Clary and Simon are alone in the car here. Simon doesn't want to talk about it, but they end up kind of getting into it, and Simon asks Clary to see him, like actually look at him, not just through the friend lens, and she's still conflicted. She seems to really not know whether or not she could get there with him. Simon sorts through CDs. Simon had wanted to come in, but they insisted that he stay behind because they'll need a getaway car, and sunlight kills demons. So if he stays outside with the car ready to go, it's safer for everyone. The Shadowhunters and Clary are at the car getting everything ready before they finally go inside. Alec is acting weird here. He's clearly trying to be tough after the fight with Clary and being insecure that Jace is going to think that he's scared. Alec clearly Googled how to be a brave little boy this morning before they went on this expedition and decided that the answer was saying things like, let's kick some demon butt, and choosing a large phallically shaped weapon instead of the bow that he typically uses. Other people passing by in the street can't see the teenagers like strapping on all these weapons. And we remember that it's because they're glamours. Then Simon asks how he can see them if nobody else can. And Jay says that it's because he knows the truth of what he's looking at now. So Simon is also now able to see into this world. Clary, Jace, Alec, and Izzy now go knock on Dorothea's door. Clary notes that Dorothea's toes are painted a tasteful shell pink. It's women supporting women. Good for you, Clary. Dorothea is acting weird. She seems to be confused. They're trying to tell her that she actually has the mortal cup. I wouldn't even have told her that much. I just would have asked about the deck of cards and tried to get it back from her. But they do end up telling her, you have the mortal cup, you just don't know that you have it. Dorothea continues acting weird. Clary finally just grabs the card and then puts the rune on to grab the cup. She does successfully get the cup out. She uses Jace's stele to do it. She still does not have one, so she grabs Jace's here and she uses that to pull the cup out. We now have our group in possession of the mortal cup. That is big. Dorothea immediately goes to grab it, says something's wrong with it, and that she needs to look at it. Jace steps in between Clary and Dorothea immediately, tells Dorothea not to touch it. Dorothea is still acting really off. She then pulls the curtain down that is covering the portal that's in her house, the one that Clary and Jace have already gone through, and they see this giant thing racing at them full speed through the portal, comes through the portal, jumps on Dorothea. Some descriptors here the book used was 9 feet tall, oozing, and old bones. Same. The demon is Abaddon. The amount of pictures I went through trying to get this one, and I still don't think I really like that one, but whatever, we're here. I'm gonna read this because it's one of the first big bad demons that we're introduced to. The demon says, I am Abaddon, I am the demon of the abyss, mine are the empty places between the worlds. Mine is the wind and the howling darkness. I am as unlike those mewling things you call demons as an eagle is unlike a fly. You cannot hope to defeat me, give me the cup or die. And this is Gracie Talks, welcome to my channel. Abaddon is a greater demon, and what happened is that the demon's corporeal form from the other world wasn't in the apartment, so the group couldn't sense the demon energy, so his spirit was inhabiting Dorothea, but his corporeal form was in this other dimension. He gets a corporeal form to then join his spirit that's in the room. So when that happened, Abaddon broke Dorothea's back like a glow stick, and not in the fun way. She is dead, but at least she went out wearing that tasteful shell pink toenail polish. Bye-bye now. I like to think, by the way, that the demon was actually the one who painted her toenails pink. Basically, everyone gets injured in this fight except for Clary. Jace is protecting Clary, Alec and Izzy are protecting each other, and Clary is just trying to avoid the fray. I didn't do that on purpose, but I hate that it's still a pun. During this fight, Alec goes down. He is unresponsive, incredibly injured. Abaddon gets Jace by the throat. All of the Shadowhunters are down now, including Izzy. Clary's the only one left, and she has no idea what to do. She kind of freezes. And then Simon, remember archery camp, shoots an arrow through the skylight in the apartment building so that the sunlight will come in, which then, again, doesn't kill the demon because the demon is still alive in the other dimension, but it destroys the form of the demon that's in this world. So the demon is taken care of for now because of Simon. The book notes that Clary had forgotten about Simon again. You're trying to figure out if you could possibly be in love with him, but you keep forgetting that he's a human who exists. There was a time where he wasn't, but that was because he was a rat and he was adorable. The fight was very bad for our group, but Clary does still have the cup. It says that she zips it in her hoodie, and I want to know what hoodie is supporting that. It says that it's about the size of a wine glass.
So it has to be a hoodie with like one of the big pockets. You just put both your hands in, it's like a pullover. Because it's like a zip-up hoodie and there's a pocket, there's no way. There's no way.
I'd actually just like to see the hoodie so that I can confirm, but things are not looking good for Alec. They're trying to patch him up with runes and then take him back to the Institute where they can further take care of him. Clary still has Jace's stele, so they're using Izzy's stele to try and put these runes on him, but the runes aren't working because Abaddon was a greater demon. At one point, Alec gains consciousness and asks if he was the one that killed Abaddon, and Clary says yes. Just, yeah, bud. You sure did. It was very kind, but also reading the book, it was very scary because you start thinking that Alec actually might die. I mean, no spoilers, but use your heads. Simon is driving all of them back to the Institute. They're trying to get there as fast as possible. Clary feels bad because she could tell that Alec was trying to act tough because of what Clary had said to him, which, yeah. Clary also feels useless because she didn't do anything. She talks about how she had no idea what her role was. How was she supposed to help in any way? What was she supposed to do? Simon has earned respect for saving the day, and that is correct. Clary and Simon also reconnect in the car, sort of in the aftermath of this. They have settled right back into being friends and supporting each other because all of these crazy things are happening. They get Alec to the infirmary. I said Alec is in bed with Hodge and Izzy, and I just wish that I would have thought about how that sounded. Alec's in the infirmary bed. Hodge and Izzy are with him. Jace is notably missing. Clary goes to talk to Jace. We find out that Hodge's antidotes won't work because it was a greater demon and that Alec could die. Clary tries to comfort Jace, but Jace isn't having it. He's really devastated and he's really beating himself up. My dog is here. You can't see her. Hi, Poop. I'm trying to do everything right with the audio. I don't have the AC going. It's 90 degrees outside. The one thing with the sound that I can't get rid of is just like the dog noises. So I really don't want to like put her up somewhere or ask her to stop moving around. So you might hear some dog noises. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to read this part because I think this part shows their motivations and how seriously they take it and the code. Jay says, I may not believe in sin, but I do feel guilt. We Shadowhunters live by a code, and that code isn't flexible. Honor, fault, penance, those are real to us, and they have nothing to do with religion, everything to do with who we are. I knew Alec wasn't acting like himself. I knew something was wrong, but all I could think about was you. If he dies, it will be like I killed him. I let my father die. And now I've killed the only brother I ever had. That's so rough. Hodge interrupts him. Hodge needs to send a message to the Silent Brothers, but we don't know when they'll come because they come at their own discretion. Hodge, Jace, and Clary all end up in the library. They haven't really had time to catch up yet because it was all hands on deck with Alec. They finally clue Hodge into the fact that they have the cup. Now Hodge starts being weird. He grabs Jace and says, do you know what you've done? He tells Jace that he looks so much like his father. And then he calls Hugo Hugin. And Hugin attacks Clary, steals the cup from her, and gives the cup to Hodge. Jace is asleep at Hodge's feet. Whatever Hodge did, he said that Jace isn't hurt, he's just asleep. Clary is now trapped behind an invisible barrier. Hodge takes Jace's ring off his hand, the one that has the W on it. He puts it on his own hand, on Hodge's hand, twists it 3 times, and a man appears. This is Valentine. My cartoon villain has joined the party. Turns out Hodge and Valentine have a deal that if Hodge gives Valentine the cup, Valentine will break Hodge's curse. Valentine has a ring that looks like Jace's, but Valentine's also has stars around it. Hodge seems to be really broken up over the fact that he's betraying the kids. Valentine is twisting things around and saying that Hodge doesn't owe the Lightwoods anything because they weren't punished like Hodge. Hodge does seem genuinely conflicted, like he's struggling and scared and guilty. Valentine is calm this entire time, chill, eerie, He's just being a dick. They clearly don't like each other, but they were working in conjunction because Hodge has been so miserable being stuck in the Institute with his curse. And also we have to remember that Hodge was one of the ones who always stayed loyal to the Circle. He only flipped at the end, and that was really just so that the Clave wouldn't kill him. Valentine says that he's going to take Jace and the cup. Hodge says you promised you wouldn't hurt him, talking about Jace, and then Valentine asks what Hodge would do if Valentine was going to hurt Jace. Valentine is like, would you back out of the deal if I told you that I was going to hurt Jace? And Hodge says yes, that he'll only give Valentine the cup if he promises not to hurt Jace. Valentine then says no, but she'll give it to me anyway. I love the power play of that, fully making Hodge come to terms with what a coward he is. We have to remember Valentine is still here to do very bad things, though. Valentine grabs Jace and says he'll be with his father where he belongs. Remember that Jace's father, Michael Wayland, is dead, so that sounds bad. They can't see Clary behind the barrier, but she can see them. So she's watching this all go down. Valentine does break the curse for Hodge. He had to because he had made this promise, so regardless of whether or not he wanted to, he did break the curse. And then Valentine disappears with Jace and with the cup. Clary is absolutely fuming at Hodge. She's still trapped. Hodge writes a letter, sends it off, doesn't really talk about it, and then says that Clary still doesn't understand what's going on. Clary's asking how he could effectively hand Jace over to be killed and betray the whole family. If you take a step back, this whole thing makes sense. Why would he be letting these kids run around New York? And doing this, he was banking on them getting the cup the whole time because he had this deal with Valentine. All the messages that he was supposed to be sending to the Clave was not sending them. Nobody in Idris has any idea that all of this is going down. We get more of Hodge and Clary talking about this in the library and what his motivations were and why he did this. Basically, it was just to be rid of the curse. He's still scared of Valentine. He couldn't handle having the curse anymore. Clary asks why give him Jace, reminds Hodge that Valentine killed Jace's father, and Hodge says that Valentine did not kill Jace's father. File that away. Hodge says he's trying to be a good man in his own ways, that he never deserved the curse to begin with, and he fears Valentine more than the Clave, and Valentine would have gotten the cup anyway. At least this way he can be free. I like that being his justification for why he did what he did. And look at him, up to no good. Clary is making one final attempt trying to get through to Hodge. She says, you can still fix this, tell me where Valentine is. I'm going to read this part too. No, he breathed the word. It is said that the Nephilim are the children of men and angels. All that this angelic heritage has given to us is a longer distance to fall. You were not raised as one of us. You have no part of this life of scars and killing. You can still get away. Leave the Institute, Clary, as soon as you can. Leave and never come back. I can't, she said. I can't do that. Then you have my condolences, he said, and walked out of the room. Another great exit line. Hodge and Valentine absolutely serving in this chapter. I know they're villains and they're doing bad things, but they absolutely nailed it this chapter. This is what you think is the big bad all hope is lost moment of the book, and then they just keep coming. But this is really the first one that kicks it all off. It's bad. Clary's alone, trapped. Alec is dying. Izzy doesn't have any idea what's going on. Jace is gone, taken by Valentine, who still has Jocelyn and now also has the cup. And Hodge is running around and he was a fake friend to begin with. This is why it's important that Clary has Jace's stele. Again, remember me pointing that out? It's important because she still has it now. She has this intuition. She feels what to draw. She can see it in her mind. She draws a room. It breaks the barrier and she chases after Hodge. They fight more, and I have this whole thing in my notes of what's her plan here. He fully throws a chakram at her. Remember Jace saying that was Hodge's favorite weapon? This flying disc that could have killed her. She ducks in time, but he's about to throw another one and gives her a chance to run, and she doesn't. He's throwing knives at you. He's attempting to kill you. And she's just like, no, how could you do this? Tell me why. Get out of there. Go home. So she doesn't run. He's still attacking her. And then a werewolf comes in between them. Again, with the werewolves flying in. Hodge looks at the werewolf and says, I thought you had fled. And then also says, Valentine would take you back. Hodge and the werewolf fight. Hodge throws the disc at the werewolf, and the wolf bites Hodge and leaves him down, presumably dead. Not a confirmed kill. We will not put the white bar on Hodge. Clary wakes up on a cot. She is covered in blood. She is injured. It looks like she's in an old jail cell. And who walks in? Give you one guess. It's Luke. Last time we saw him, he was talking to Pangborn and Blackwell. We found out that they were all in the circle, and he was saying that he was going to leave, get out of town, that he didn't care about Jocelyn or Clary. Clary.
Oh, God.
Clary is fuming, again, tells him to get away. Luke says that he doesn't expect her to understand. He knows that she feels like he abandoned her, and she said, I don't feel like you abandoned me. You did abandon me. You never cared about me or Jocelyn. You lied. Luke says that he didn't lie about everything, and she asks, if you didn't lie about everything, is your name really Luke Garraway? That is excellent. I love this woman in a fight. You're not a liar? How about the one biggest lie you ever told me? What about that one? Excellent. We see here that Luke is injured. Why would he be injured? Because he got hit with Hodge's disc, because he was the werewolf. Luke is a werewolf. I will update the wall now. Don't worry, it'll be accurate. Clary then thinks that Luke murdered Hodge if he was the werewolf in the alley who bit Hodge, but Luke says that Hodge wasn't dead. Luke went back for the body. There was no body. He says Hodge probably ran off. Gretel and Alaric come in. We meet these people. I actually love their photos. We didn't have good physical descriptions of Gretel and Alaric from the book. Like Pangborn and Blackwell, no real physical descriptions in the book, but I had some in the comic book. Gretel and Alaric, not a lot to work with. So what I ended up doing is giving their name the vibe to me that they like gave off and then saying who is secretly a werewolf. AI said, you got it. I'm gonna put these weird werewolf images mixed with these people. I love it. We find out that these are Luke's second and third in command. Gretel is a second in command. Alaric is a third in the command. Luke is leader of the wolf pack. It feels like a pretty big deal. He's leader of the New York wolf pack. Alaric is the werewolf that Clary threw the dagger at in the vampire's lair. These were the werewolves that came to get her. Luke wasn't actually there, but the other werewolves in the pack were. He tells Clary it was a good throw and there are no hard feelings. He also gives her the dagger back, so she has the dagger again. Luke was the one who sent the werewolves to the vampire's lair to protect Clary. Apparently, Luke wanted Clary to know the whole truth about everything. The world, who Jocelyn was, all of this the whole time, but Jocelyn didn't want her to know. And Luke explains that he was lying to Valentine's men with what he was saying. He was just trying to play them because he actually didn't know anything, and he said that you can't bargain with Valentine because Valentine won't hesitate to kill Jocelyn. Clary now has a lot of reasons to distrust pretty much everyone in her life, so she doesn't buy it for a second, and then she calls him a slimy downworlder who betrayed his friendship with a Shadowhunter who treated him like an equal. This is what I'm saying. They're not the Circle, but certainly that is not how you talk about a class of people if you don't think that you're better than them. And she didn't even grow up like this. She's been in this world, this whole book takes place in 2 weeks, right? She's been in this world for a couple days now, maybe a week and a half, and she calls him a slimy downworlder? No. It's hypocritical. The main group is not treating downworlders like they're equal. We get Luke's whole story here. Luke and Jocelyn grew up in Idris together. There are small towns around, and then there's the one city where the Clave meets, which is Alicante, the city of glass we've talked about. They've known each other since they were kids. It's called City of Glass because the towers are made out of the demon-repelling substance that the steles are made of, and it sparkles like glass. Jocelyn and Luke were sent to Alicante for school. Luke meets Valentine there. Valentine was older than Luke by a year. We're going to do some math on this. The Accords were 16 years ago, and the picture when the Circle was formed was 20 years ago. The timeline on this is the uprising was in 1991, and they were a few years out of school. Valentine was apparently the most popular boy in school, handsome, clever, rich, incredible warrior. Jocelyn also, she was just a natural shadow hunter. Of course she was. Luke, on the other hand, struggled with everything. He came from an unremarkable family, and it sounds like the Clave is pretty classist. He couldn't even handle the runes when they would try to put runes on him. He said he couldn't do anything simple, and he thought about running away and becoming a mundane. He was that, messed up about this. Then Valentine showed up at Luke's room. Luke says he didn't even know that Valentine knew who he was, and he offered to train Luke. He gets Luke to pass exams, bear the runes, kill a demon. Luke says he basically worshipped him. Valentine ended up helping a lot of misfits like that. Valentine helped Hodge, who Luke says was more into books than people. Valentine helped Maris Trueblood, who became Maris Lightwood, whose brother married a mundane, so their family was in poor standing. Valentine helped Robert Lightwood, who was terrified of the marks, the runes. Luke at the time thought that Valentine was amazing, incredible, and being a nice person, but now he thinks that he was building himself a cult. Valentine was worried about the dwindling numbers of Shadowhunters. He wanted the Clave to be using the cup more. The school's position was that it wasn't for them to decide who becomes a Shadowhunter. The teachers told Valentine that the humans can't survive the transition, and Valentine said that they were lying. That's how he sort of sold it to other people. Valentine convinced the group that the Clave was basically being selfish and lying, and that if you made all humans drink from the cup, it was actually a gift to them and they wouldn't die. Luke acknowledges that Valentine probably knew the truth, which is that the school wasn't lying. The humans would mostly die, but obviously Valentine just didn't care. They started the Circle with the intention of saving the race of Shadowhunters from extinction. Like Hodge was saying, it did come from a good place, or, I don't think from Valentine it came from a good place, but how he got these other people involved. Like, we're supposed to believe that Luke and Jocelyn are good people and wouldn't want to harm other people. They were doing it to save each other and to save their race. Valentine's dad was killed in a routine raid on a werewolf encampment, so his dad ended up being killed by werewolves. Luke says that Valentine came back to school different, angrier, cruel, and that Luke was still trying to please him. Everyone still was. He said that Jocelyn was able to calm Valentine, that she was never one of the misfits, quote unquote, and that Jocelyn called the rest of them Valentine's fan club. She was always kind of on her own in the group, but had sympathy for Valentine when his father died, and they ended up falling in love. Luke says that he loved Valentine too, that Valentine was his closest friend, and he was happy to see Jocelyn with him. When they left school, Jocelyn and Valentine married and went to live on her family's estate. Luke also went back home, but the circle continued, grew in scale and power, and Valentine grew with it, and then the ideals ended up changing as well. The circle wanted the Mortal Cup to make more Shadowhunters. That was always their game plan. But since Valentine's dad died, Valentine had started supporting killing all Downworlders, and not just Downworlders that broke the Accords, because the world was for humans and not part demons, was his opinion. He thought the Downworlders could never fully be trusted. So also the idea that Downworlders were bad was not initially part of the circle. All of these other parts got added in later, including when you start getting some of the anti-Downworlder speech. So at this point, people are sort of giving the side eye. Luke says that he started getting uncomfortable with the new direction of the circle, the new one that's talking about mass murder, okay. But he stayed, he still felt attached to Valentine. Also, Jocelyn asked Luke to stay in the hopes that Luke could help moderate some of the extreme views, but Luke says that it was impossible. They stayed because they loved Valentine, and they were also trying to temper his views. They didn't realize the lengths that he would end up going to. Luke says that Robert and Mayrus were almost as bad as Valentine, so now we get some more context on them. Again, Robert and Mayrus, along with Hodge, were the ones who stayed loyal to Valentine until the circle lost. Also, we now know that they are homophobic, and they honestly just seem like they would not be fun to hang out with at all. They hunted down Downworlders who had committed even slightest infraction of the law. Valentine never killed a creature who hadn't broken the Accords, but he blinded a werewolf child trying to get information. Oh, he tortured others. Jocelyn got pregnant at this point. We're doing it. Jocelyn got pregnant. She went to tell Luke that she's pregnant. We're still in the past. We're still in Luke's history right now. Jocelyn got pregnant at this point, tells Luke that she's pregnant and afraid of Valentine. The child is Valentine. She says that Valentine's behavior had turned erratic, that he would disappear into the cellar and she could hear screams. Luke went to Valentine to check in, and Valentine said that Jocelyn was just being a nervous pregnant lady. You know how they get. Valentine invites Luke to hunt with him that night. They were still trying to, he says, clean out, murder, the nest of werewolves who had killed Valentine's father. It had been years since Valentine's father had died, but he still held this vendetta, and he was going after the group of werewolves that were there that night. Valentine and Luke had been working on that, so they go to hunt that night. Valentine said that he would guard Luke, but he didn't. Now, where this gets more depressing is we find out that Valentine and Luke were parabatai. Valentine had made himself an important, trusted person in all of these people's lives. He and Jocelyn legitimately fell in love before things got extreme in terms of his views, at least from what we know right now. And again, I'm reading these one-on-one as we go through, so I haven't read past this first book. It sounded like when his dad died was kind of when these things flipped over. But it seems like before, these people had reason to trust him and to not be wary about any of this. And Valentine and Luke were best friends, and they were also parabatai. Very intense bond. Makes more sense to me why Luke ended up sticking around, as well as why Jocelyn ended up sticking around. Valentine has convinced Luke that everything's fine. He says, let's go hunting tonight, I'll guard you. And then he doesn't guard Luke, and a werewolf bites Luke. Getting bit by a werewolf, which would already be really traumatic in general, and then especially because Luke was obviously a Shadowhunter, and there's this entire history between Shadowhunter and Downworlder, and then on top of it was his parabatai. Luke says that not all werewolf bites will turn you, so Luke healed from the bite and then waited for the full moon to see if he was actually going to turn or not. He said the clave would have locked him in an observation cell, but Valentine and Jocelyn didn't tell anyone to protect him, and then he did change into a werewolf 3 weeks later on a full moon. Luke made his way back to the manor after the change. He said Jocelyn was just happy to see him. She came running out, but then Valentine told Luke, we're going to get into some more guarded semantics here. Valentine told Luke that Valentine should unalive Luke, but Valentine can't bring himself to do it because it's his parabatai, and he gives Luke a Kindle dagger that had belonged to his dad and tells Luke to do the honorable thing and unalive himself. Incredibly dark. Jocelyn is not there for this conversation. I believe when Luke came back, Jocelyn ran out to him, and then Valentine was like, let me handle this. He's a werewolf now. You need to stay away from him. And then Valentine and Luke go out. Jocelyn's probably assuming that Valentine is still going to look after Luke and do what's best for him. And I think that Valentine genuinely believes that that's what's best for Luke, because he genuinely believes that Luke is now a monster, because he believes that Downworlders are monsters. So in a way, they're both kind of heartbroken. Luke ends up running back to the werewolf nest where he was bitten. He demands to meet in combat the wolf who had bitten Luke. Luke thinks he's going to die. This is what he believes to be his last act, and it is to go out avenging Valentine's father to make sure that Valentine would still have a high opinion of him in death. I think that goes to show you how convincing Valentine was, as well as how strong the parabatai bond is. It's crazy. Now, I've talked about how Jocelyn is the baddest bitch in town. Luke is one of the baddest boy bitches in town. Do you see what it feels like to gender words that don't need to be gendered? Do you get it? Luke ends up killing the leader of the werewolf clan that he had demanded to meet in combat, and the werewolf law says that whoever kills the clan leader takes his place. So Luke, at this point, can't go home. Things were already messed up with Valentine. He's now the leader of the pack, and he just stays there and leaves his old life behind. Also, the biggest issue at the moment was being ousted from Valentine and then being turned into a werewolf and feeling like his life was over. He wanted to not be alive anymore. So there was that going on, but then also the Clave would have never accepted him, and I don't know what they would have done if they found out that he had turned. He definitely wouldn't have been allowed to be in the Clave, I'm assuming. So he's living this new life now. He says that he almost forgot what it was like to be a Shadowhunter, but he never forgot Jocelyn. He wanted to go back to Jocelyn. He was scared leaving her alone with Valentine. He knew that if he went near the manor house, that the Circle would hunt him and kill him. He says that Jocelyn ended up coming to Luke. The wolves knew Luke had been a Shadowhunter, but it was like a secret, one that they were kind of like ashamed of, and that the wolves were disappointed when Jocelyn showed up, that the tensions are still high with like the werewolf pack seeing Shadowhunters. Okay, we're still in this backstory. Hang tough with me, all right? It's getting good. Jocelyn has now showed up at this wolf pack. They're seeing each other for the first time. Jocelyn is no longer pregnant. She had had her baby boy named Jonathan Christopher. I know you're thinking, why isn't he on the wall? Oh, it's on the wall. So Claire has a brother. Okay. Okay. Jocelyn is mad at Luke for not telling her that he was still alive. So that was the other part that clicked for me, is if they were such good friends, what happened there? Luke basically knows that he can never go back to the manor. He's going to be dead if he goes. So he stopped from visiting her, and she didn't visit him because she assumed that he was actually dead. Valentine had told the Circle that Luke unalived himself. Jocelyn never believed that story, but she did believe that something had happened to him if Valentine was saying that and he wasn't there anymore. Jocelyn came to warn Luke that there were rumors in Alicante of a werewolf who had once been a shadow hunter. Valentine was on his way there to see if it was Luke or not, but because Jocelyn warned him, Luke was able to hide in time. Luke and Jocelyn then begin meeting in secret. The Accords were being signed a year early because of a conflicting long fairy ritual. Valentine ended up feeling like this was another place where the Clave was backing down to the Downworlders. The Circle worked with demons, the greatest enemy of Shadowhunters. They worked with demons to get weapons that could be smuggled undetected into the Great Hall of the Angel, which is where the Accords are signed. They work with demons to get weapons to attack the Downworlders and the Shadowhunters who would support the Downworlders. With the help of a demon, Valentine stole the Mortal Cup, which we knew. Valentine left a lookalike, and the Clave didn't realize until months later. The claim seems awful and also dumb. The amount of times as well that people fake their own death and the Clave just goes, okay. You would think the technology these people would have would be insane. They don't seem to ever be able to verify if anyone is dead or not. Figure it out. Jocelyn is sort of working in secret against Valentine. She's trying to figure out what Valentine's plan for the cup is. She knows they're trying to smuggle weapons in for the Accords to start this war, but she doesn't know what he's trying to do with the cup yet. Luke says that he has fond memories of that time because it was him and Jocelyn sending secret messages, and they were working with the Downworlders. They're sending messages to the fairies, to the warlocks, the vampires. Even though he was a werewolf and there's beef there, they're talking to the werewolves. They're warning everyone, and there were Shadowhunters and Downworlders working together. It actually sounds really sweet. Then we get the day of the Accords. Jocelyn and Valentine leave their son, Jonathan Christopher, at home. He would have been an infant. Luke follows them on foot. Valentine obviously does not know that he's following them. And at the signing, the Circle stands up with weapons and starts attacking everyone. He said it was the biggest bloodshed in their history. Jocelyn marked the Circle members with a spell so that the other groups tried to not harm Shadowhunters who weren't in the Circle. But Luke said it was still messy. He doesn't know who was responsible for the innocent lives that were taken, but that they were blamed. Luke and the other Downworlders who were trying to stop the bloodshed, they ended up being blamed for the deaths of the innocents. Luke and Valentine are fighting. The Lightwoods drop their weapons and flee. Sounds about right. Hodge had fled at the start. Also sounds about right. Jocelyn runs up to Luke and Valentine. She's begging Valentine to stop. She's trying to remind Valentine, this is your almost brother, this is your friend, this is Luke. And Valentine says that Luke is a monster now because he let his blood be polluted. It's so gross the way that they talk about this. Valentine puts a dagger to Jocelyn's throat to get Luke to immediately drop his blade, which he does. Valentine accuses Luke of always wanting Jocelyn for himself, and now they've plotted together. Luke and Jocelyn plotted together to betray Valentine, and Valentine says that they'll regret what they've done the rest of their lives. Valentine injures Luke, takes Jocelyn, runs away. Luke ends up finding her by the river. She says that she wants to go home to her son, and they go to their manor house. And this is rough. Jocelyn got there first. Luke says that he finds Jocelyn kneeling in the ashes. The entire house has been burned, and then there are bones there. Whose bones are who? Because people are faking their deaths out here. There were 4 sets of bones. 2 she believed were her mother and father. Remember that Jocelyn and Valentine had moved back to live in her house. They lived with their parents. A 3rd pile of bones had Valentine's silver amulet with the insignia of the Circle, so that's why they thought that that one was Valentine. And then there were the the bones of an infant child, which was Jonathan Christopher, Jocelyn's first child, Clary's brother. Luke says that Jocelyn didn't speak for a week. Luke took her out of Idris. They fled to Paris. They had no money, but Jocelyn refused to go to the Institute and ask for help. She said that she was done with Shadowhunters and done with the Shadow World. Luke tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't back down. She was pregnant with another child. Do you see where this is going? She said that she wanted to create a new life for the child. She didn't want them to be involved with this world at all. Jocelyn wouldn't tell Luke where she was going. The farther away from Idris, the better. We're back to this thing that keeps coming up where you're alive and then you think, I wonder if the opposite was true, what that would be like, and then you follow through with it. Luke says that he knows that if Jocelyn wasn't pregnant at that time, that's what she would have done. So that's why he ended up letting her go and being separated, because at least if she was fleeing to the mundane world, she would still be alive, and so he lets her go. He says goodbye to her at the airport. The last words Jocelyn spoke to him were, Valentine is not dead. This woman gets it. She knows. She gets it. Took the Claves 16 years to figure that out, and that was just because Valentine all but announced I'm back. She knew from the jump. She said, this man is not dead. Luke returned to his pack, but he said that he didn't find peace. He wasn't the leader that he had been before. He couldn't find friends or a mate. He said he was too much human, too much Shadowhunter to be at peace among the wolves. He ends up going back to Idris in the Hall of the Angel to sign the Accords. The Accords never got signed the day of the uprising because of all of the uprising that was going on. They gather everyone back again. They're going to sign the Accords for real this time. It's the Shadowhunters, the 4 branches of half-humans. Luke saw the Lightwoods there, and they fill him in that they, Robert and Maris, Hodge, and Michael Wayland, were the only Circle members to have survived. They believe Valentine to be dead at this time. The Lightwoods tell Luke that Michael Wayland, who was guilt-ridden over the loss of his wife, I'm assuming she died in the uprising, so he hid himself away at his country estate with his young son. So that's where Jace was raised by Michael Wayland in this isolated place. Clave had punished the other 3 with exile. So yeah, Robert, Mavis, Hodge have to go to New York. The Accords are signed. Luke says at this point he knows that he needs to be with Jocelyn to find peace, so he left his pack. He traveled alone. He went back to Paris for a clue, then he went to London, took a boat to Boston, but kept thinking of New York and the Shadowhunters that had been exiled there. He puts together the pieces that Jocelyn was an exile too in a way, so he goes to New York with a duffel bag, no idea where to find her. He sees a painting in a gallery of the view from the windows of Jocelyn's family's manor house. He recognizes her work, sees her new name, Jocelyn Frey, and he found her that night in the East Village with a young Clary. There are going to be a couple strings that get added to this wall that are unholy in nature. This is the first of them. Clary is Valentine's daughter. Obviously. If you're reading one of these books and there's a big bad who's potentially the right age to be the main character's father, it's probably what's going to happen. Clary is the daughter that Jocelyn was pregnant with when she fled. She has really and truly done all of this to try and protect Clary. Jonathan Clark, who Clary was told was her father, remember the military guy? The box that Jocelyn had with the JC on it, and she said that it was for Jonathan Clark, which was Clary's dad. Well, it was actually for Jonathan Christopher, Clary's brother. Incredibly convenient that she found a man named Jonathan Clark. Luke says the picture that Jocelyn had, he was a real person. Jocelyn was asked to paint a portrait of him for his funeral, but his name really was Jonathan Clark, and he did die in a car crash. He's just not Clary's dad. Clary is reeling from the fact that Valentine is actually her father. She has a brother. And there were already all of these reasons to be wary of Valentine and to not like him. All the murdering, all of that stuff. But also, she's now finding out that she had a brother that Valentine killed. And then Jocelyn's parents, so her grandparents. And for all of the fake deaths that we've had, Luke says that her grandparents and her brother, Jonathan Christopher, are actually dead as far as Luke knows. This was why when Luke and Jocelyn were fighting at the very beginning, Luke had said Clary isn't Jonathan. He was trying to warn Jocelyn away from being too overprotective of Clary. Gretel tends to Clary's wounds and Luke's wounds, and we find out that Hugin was Valentine's bird. Apparently Valentine had 2 pet birds. Their names were Hugin and Munin, meaning thought and memory. Hugo is actually Hugin, and Hugin is a Circle member. The bird gets a name reveal. I put the circle on Hugin because Hugin was an active participant. He stole the cup from Clary. Clary's overwhelmed. She's still kind of pissed at Luke, but she does want to focus up. Valentine has Jocelyn, Jace, and the cup. That's too many things for him to have. He's got too many things that he needs right now. Clary and Luke have a wolf pack, so let's do this. Clary remembers that Valentine came through a portal in the library, and then she remembers that there are only 2 portals in New York. Putting the pieces together. Proud of her. Magnus had said the 2 portals were at Dorothea's and Renwick's. Luke asks Gretel for a phone book to look up Renwick's. Clary calls Simon to have him Google it and doesn't tell him what's going on to keep Simon safe. Clary asks Luke if she can kill Valentine herself because Valentine took her whole family away and she knows now, but he reminds her that it won't solve anything. I think it's more of an example of him seeing how hardened she's already become to this world, on top of her saying the phrase slimy downworlder. Google tells us that Renwick's is Renwick's Smallpox Hospital, an abandoned hospital built on Roosevelt Island in the 1800s. And Luke says that Roosevelt Island used to be Blackwell's Island, so family property of Samuel Blackwell, so it makes sense that Valentine would be hiding out there. Also, we get more context on where the werewolf's lair is. It's glamored from the outside to look like a restaurant called the Jade Wolf. The Wolfpack and Clary get ready. They get in the truck to drive to Renwick's, and Luke gives her food. Finally, the sigh of relief I did when I found out that someone had given her food. Clary's asking more about the werewolf of it all now. Luke says that he can shift at will. He has control over it. Newbies, brand new werewolves, are the only ones who can't control it, and that Luke became the leader of the wolf pack a week ago. He said that he had left that life behind. He and Jocelyn were truly living like mundanes, but when Jocelyn was taken, he killed the leader of the wolf pack to take over, knowing that he would need an army to protect Jocelyn and Clary. Remember when she went to his house to spy on him and the two men were there and he walked and he was covered in bruises? He had just killed the leader of this wolf pack to take over. Now, on the one hand, kind of the energy that I'm looking for. On the other hand, this werewolf pack did not sign up to be fodder. He killed a dude to make this happen. You seem to have a wolf pack, and I have the ability to kill you. Let's both exercise our best with that. But we're moving on because I would rather focus on how sweet it is to have Clary and Luke back together. Luke says that he knows that she's not going to stay in the car at Renwick's, so they do go in together. The werewolves are all circling them to get them to the front door, guarding them. Renwick's is glamored. The abandoned hospital is just a glamour. It's actually a beautiful old Gothic structure like a castle. At Renwick's, the werewolves are attacked by Forsaken. Valentine already has a lot of Forsaken guarding the place. The werewolves are all protecting Luke and Clary. I was really trying to figure out when reading this who has the upper hand. The wolves are big and strong, but the Forsaken are hard to kill and just keep coming. At one point, a Forsaken busts through. It's pure chaos. Luke has Alaric grab Clary and take her to the front door of Renwick's just to get her out of there. Gretel gets killed. Bye-bye now. Clary's watching this and realizing how human all of the werewolves are. Duh. Apologizes again for throwing the dagger at Alaric. He's still super chill about it. The second that Gretel and Alaric showed up, and they were so chill and I liked them so much, I know. Clary is crying because she just saw Gretel get killed, and Luke comes up and asks if Clary feels like Gretel was just a downworlder. Clary says, nope, super sorry about that comment I made. I don't feel the way about downworlders. I actually thought that this was important because without Luke's voice in her ear, she's only hearing the ones coming from the main group, and the main group still has some work to do on how they feel about downworlders. Luke says he's relieved that she doesn't feel a negative way about downworlders because he didn't want the Lightwoods turning Clary into them. Clary and Luke are going to go inside now. There's a lot of goals now. You got to get Jocelyn, you got to get Jace, you got to get the cup. I think we all knew that they weren't leaving with all three. Alaric wants to come inside with them. I say yes, bring him. The two of you guys are not going to be able to do this by yourself, especially because Luke is going to have to protect Clary. Luke tells Alaric to stay back, that he needs him to help fight the Forsaken outside. So we got the werewolves fighting the Forsaken outside. That battle is still going on. Luke and Clary go inside. They are searching the house. They find a weapons room, and they find Jocelyn. It's not as simple as that, though, but I was still glad to see her. They see Jocelyn. She is in a room on a bed, asleep in a white nightgown. Why is it always a creepy white nightgown? What is with that? She is cuffed to the bed, and she has a tube hooked up to her. She's motionless but alive, and they say it has to be a spell because they can't get her to wake up. Pangborn and Blackwell show up now. They're taunting Luke about how Luke was getting his downworlders to do his dirty work for him. They're actually kind of right about that. I don't know that we saw anywhere in the book that the werewolves signed up for this battle. They're doing it because they have to, and Luke is the leader of the pack. Maybe some of them would have helped fight Valentine anyway. Obviously, they share a common enemy in Valentine, but does that mean that you would necessarily give your life right now and go to battle? I don't know. Pangborn and Blackwell are being overall creeps. They accuse Clary of being a little young for Luke. The amount of sexualizing familial relationships. Gag. Pangborn and Blackwell say not to feel bad for the Forsaken. Valentine will use the cup on them soon so they can be Shadowhunters and better than the Clave members who are now downworlder-loving softies. Luke tries to negotiate with Pangborn and Blackwell. He says, if you let me take Jocelyn, I'll call off the werewolves. We'll call it even. Blackwell, however, wants Jocelyn dead, and Luke accuses Blackwell of wanting to marry Valentine himself. Luke and Blackwell get into a fight. Luke ends up killing Blackwell. He threw a scalpel. Bye-bye now. Pangborn and Luke then get into battle. Luke tells Clary to run. She does. She checks the weapon room to try and grab one. None of them will come loose, so she goes to find Jace. She finds Jace in a room, standing at a curtain in what looks like a nice dining room. They hug. They have a big reunion. There's lots of touching. She fills him in on Luke, and Jace tells her that she shouldn't have come and to call off the werewolf pack. He says that there's been a mistake, and Clary now realizes that Jace is cleaned up, looks like he's showered, looks like he's being taken care of. And Jace said, yeah, my dad took care of me. Jace says Hodge lied and that Jace's dad is not dead. Clary is trying to fill in the blanks here when Valentine walks in. Clary immediately goes to throw her dagger at Valentine, but Jace stops her. Why does he stop her? Jace tells her to stop because Valentine is his dad. Clary doesn't believe this. By the way, if you haven't read these books and this is actually your first time, I'm assuming if you're here, for all of the 5 people that are going to watch this, I'm assuming you've read the book. But if anybody hasn't, what's it like to not know how bad this is about to get? I'm going to try to still not spoil things even as we move through. Jace says that Valentine is his father, but Clary doesn't believe it. Clary thinks that Valentine is using it to manipulate Jace and lying and saying that he's his father because Clary knows that Valentine is her father and Jonathan Christopher's father, but Jonathan Christopher is dead. This whole scene, Valentine is playing nice in front of Jace. Clary is not buying it. Jace is so over the moon to have a dad who's alive that he is on board with Valentine. He's telling Clary to hear him out. He stops Clary from killing Valentine. He takes a dagger from her. This dagger is the same one that Jace had given her. It's the dagger with the red stone for the hilt. Valentine points out that that dagger is one of a matched pair, and it has the star of the Morgensterns and the blade. His family name is Morgenstern. The book says a cold despair was spreading through Clary's veins. Jace angry, Jace hostile, furious, she could have dealt with. But this new Jace, fragile and shining in the light of his own personal miracle, was a stranger to her. This is not Jace trying to give up on the Shadowhunters. Valentine is lying to him about a lot of things, and he's obviously taking advantage of Jace's trauma and vulnerabilities. Valentine and Jace sit down. She stays standing up. They say that they want to fill her in on everything. Valentine asks about her name, and she says her full name is Clarissa, and Valentine says it's not a name that he would have chosen. And at this point, Clary figures that Valentine knows that Clary is his daughter, but that he's not saying it. She thinks that he's not saying it because of Jace, because if he's lying to Jace and telling Jace that Jace is his son, and he saw them being all touchy when he walked into the room, then he can't tell Jace that Clary is actually his daughter. It says that she can see him trying to figure out how to best use the information that he has. Clary tells Jace that Valentine is not his father because his father is Michael Wayland. Everybody knows that. Jace has the ring with the W on it. This was the stupidest part of this, is that you couldn't be a Morgenstern because your last name couldn't start with M because it starts with W because of that ring you have. That when flipped upside down is an M. I can't. Valentine and Jace say that it's not a W ring, it's an M, obviously, for Morgenstern. He glamored the rings with the Morgenstern stars around it when it showed. Valentine explains that Morgenstern is his family name. Morgenstern means morning star. Morgenstern recites this quote now about Lucifer and the falling stars, and Clary realizes that that's referencing Satan. Valentine says it references any great power that lost out of a refusal to serve. Valentine says that he wouldn't serve a corrupt government, and for that, he lost his family, lands, and almost his life. He's playing victim. Clary is calling him out. Clary tells Jace that Hodge was working for Valentine. Remember, she was in the library, she saw everything. She's trying to tell that to Jace. Valentine's story is that it was all Hodge, that Hodge took Jocelyn, Hodge stole the cup, Valentine was trying to stop Hodge, and that he brought Jocelyn here to heal her. Clary is still not buying it. She said, declined, not doing it. She's being confrontational with Valentine, and Jace tells her not to talk about his father like that. Oh boy. Valentine says that Clary doesn't want to believe that Jace is Valentine's son because Clary loves Jace. Valentine says that Clary is worried that Valentine is manipulating Jace, but if Clary looked inside her own memories, she would know that it's true, and then goes to say something to Jace and calls him Jonathan. Clary says, your name's not Jonathan, it's Jace, right? We find out that Jace is a nickname for his initials, which are JC. Clary says, you're gonna laugh, but JC doesn't stand for Jonathan Christopher, right? It does. JC stands for Jonathan Christopher. Jace is Jonathan Christopher Morgenstern. I could not fit that whole thing on there, and I won't apologize for that because that's a feat that no human could achieve. That is JC Morgenstern. That is Jonathan Christopher. We got some unholy strings coming up. I forgot to put the string up when we were talking about it earlier, so I'm very sorry about that. The red string was from their midnight makeout soiree. So now that we've got that red string up for romantic relationship, we can put the blue one up for the blood relation. I've updated the wall, and in doing so, I've also prepared my seat in hell. It's bad. I have pink nails now. What happened is my computer decided to use the computer audio instead of the microphone audio for just the very last part of this video. So I'm going to re-record it because why? We're not here to play games. That is correct. I'm not going to make you listen to white noise while I get to the craziest part of the craziest book. I want to do that to you. If you look at the strings, they get kind of on top of each other because I like for everything to be at 90 degrees. Michael Wayland is not Jace's father. Jace is Jonathan Christopher Morgenstern. He is Valentine and Jocelyn's son, which means that he and Clary have this blue string for blood relation because they're brother and sister. So that's fun. This blue string did not want to go into the wall. It took all my might and like 5 minutes to get it in. And I found that kind of symbolic. In terms of the big their brother and sister reveal, I'm assuming if you're watching this that you were familiar with the books and that you knew that this was coming. If you have read the books, you get it. You get it. If you haven't read the books and you're watching this, 1, thank you. 2, no spoilers. It's going to be okay. Look at me. It's going to be okay. I'm sure you're still thinking, why did you do this to me? I'm sorry. I read these books over 10 years ago, 2012, 2013. There were 5 books out. I think City of Lost Souls was just coming out when I started reading them. I was a library girly, so I had to wait weeks on the waiting list. I ended up being able to get the second book and the third book at the same time from the same library. I drove around to all of the different libraries and all of the different counties. Still ended up having to wait weeks after finishing the first book to read the second and third book. That was true pain. That was me lying on my floor every night, struggling with the weight of the Mortal Instruments City of Bones first installment. Diving back into the story, Valentine tells Jace, hey, great news. You're actually not an orphan. Your mom's alive. I told you she died because I didn't want you knowing she had abandoned you, but she's right downstairs. Your mom is Jocelyn. Clary is your sister. Jace is absolutely appalled and doesn't believe it, but then Clary pops in and says, it's true. Valentine says that Jace should be happy that he went from being an orphan to having a mom, a dad, and a sister. Oh boy. Valentine said that Michael Wayland actually died in the uprising. Valentine took JC because he had faked both of their deaths, and then he assumed Michael Wayland's identity and raised his son in isolation there. Valentine is left-handed like Jace. Valentine says after 10 years of raising Jace, he was blackmailed into doing whatever the blackmailer said, or else his true identity would be revealed. So to protect his kid, he staged his own death with Pangborn and Blackwell and made sure that Jace was sent to live with the Lightwoods. He's lying here, but the bones of it do make sense. It's a good lie. It seems like he actually is Jace's dad and that he did raise him. That part actually we think is true. Also remember that Jace's dad was a dick, so that one tracks. Clary is still trying to find some sort of crack in the armor to get through to Jace. Clary is saying that it's awful that Valentine would let Jace think that he died, but Valentine said that he had to, or else he wouldn't have gotten protection in the Clave because the Lightwoods owed Michael Wayland and not Valentine. Valentine says that Jocelyn fled after the uprising, that the Clave would have hunted him down. Jocelyn couldn't bear her association with Valentine and ran. He's pretending to be heartbroken about this. He said that he didn't know that she was pregnant with Clary, but that blood calls to blood. 1, is anybody here? 2, are the Chapter 55 girlies still here? Like calls to like, you hear me? Fate gave them this reunion, and now they can use the portal, go back to Idris to the manor house, and be together again as a family. No, I will not be at your Thanksgiving dinner. No, I'm busy that day. I can't make it. Jace nods. He's clearly not happy about this, but I think that he still doesn't know which way is up and which way is down at this point. And I think that, frankly, it's easier for him to believe what Valentine is saying rather than to try and parcel through everything else. He's just like, okay, I guess, fine. Clary says that she's not going anywhere with Valentine. Neither is Jocelyn. Jay says that Valentine is right. It's the only place for them to go and that they can sort things out there. No. Seems like a fun family vacation. Jay seems super defeated here. He's acting small and hesitant. Clary notes that he's acting not like himself. This whole thing has just kind of stripped him down, I think. Luke comes in. Clary is psyched he's alive. He pulls his dagger out. His dagger is the twin to Valentine's. Remember the red Kindle dagger that Jace had given Clary that Valentine had given Jace? Because it was Valentine's. Luke has the other one, and it's a blue Kindle dagger. It was the dagger that Valentine gave him when he told him to dispose of himself. We find out that Luke has killed Pangborn. Bye-bye now. Valentine and Luke are going at it now, getting into it, about to fight. Luke pieces together that Jace is Jonathan Christopher because Valentine calls him that and says that his mother would be proud talking about Jocelyn. So Luke has that piece of information too now. Jace is super mad at Jocelyn for abandoning him because if he's going to believe Valentine's story, which he is because his brain is fried, now he's pissed at Jocelyn for just leaving him to go through life alone as well. Luke tells Clary to get out of there because he and Valentine are about to fight, and so she runs, but then Jace keeps her there. He's not actually trying to keep her there to harm her in any way. He's trying to stop her from going out to the battle where the Forsaken and the werewolves are still fighting. Luke and Valentine are now posturing, just talking about how badly they're going to beat each other up. Luke says that he can tear Valentine's heart out, and Valentine says, "You tore my heart out years ago when you betrayed and deserted me." Like, just kiss already. Valentine thinks that Luke turned Jocelyn against him, against the Circle. He obviously still has an issue with the fact that Luke is a downworlder, a werewolf now, so they're still going at it. Jace is holding Clary back as Valentine is about to kill a father figure, a loved loved one of Clary's. She's trying to get through to him to turn him against Valentine, saying that Jocelyn never would have left if she knew Jace was alive. She had the baby box of him with the lock of his hair and would cry over it, but Jace doesn't want to believe it. It's just easier to be mad at her. He's just sitting with the information that he has, and I think his brain is like, no more. I'm not doing anything else. We're good. Clary says that Valentine killed Jocelyn's parents and that there were the bones of what she thought was Jonathan Christopher. So she's explaining the whole fake death scenario that resulted in why Jocelyn wouldn't have known that Jace was alive. Jace yells at her, and then Luke, who's fighting Valentine, looks over to check on Clary, and Valentine stabs Luke. Luke is on the ground. Valentine is about to kill him, and then we get this. Clary threw herself on him, Luke, just as Valentine's sword drove downward. She saw Valentine's eyes as the sword hurtled toward her. It seemed like eons, though it could have only been a split second. She saw that he could stop the blow if he wanted, saw that he knew it might well strike her if he didn't, saw that he was going to do it anyway. I mean, Valentine's kind of a bad bitch too, but that's not the point. He's bad. He's bad. It's not the point. Valentine could have stopped. There was still time, but he doesn't. I think it's important that we point that out. He's going to kill her. He's okay with killing her. That to me adds a level to this that I appreciate in these books. It's not the villain who at the end of the day still isn't really a threat to you because you're like the one person that they need to keep alive for some reason, which happens a lot with these books. So Valentine's gonna do it. He's gonna kill her. He keeps bringing the sword down, and then Jace throws his dagger and knocks the sword out of Valentine's hand. It does cut Valentine's hand, but otherwise he's unharmed. Valentine is still playing Father of the Year. I'm a chill dad. I'm a cool dad. I'm not like the other dads. And Valentine tells Jace, it's okay. I wasn't actually going to hurt your sister. And Jace says, sorry, Dad. Stop calling each other that. Clary won't get off Luke. She's still shielding him. Valentine is telling her that Luke is an enemy of the family, a monster, and that they have to kill him to save themselves. Jace still seems to be on the fence about this. He thinks Valentine is his dad and was framed, and that Luke is trying to kill him. So from where Jace is standing, Luke would be a threat that needs to be taken out. Clary is pointing out, and I actually hadn't thought of this until she said it. She points out Valentine killed Jocelyn's parents. With how many people are faking their deaths, honestly, I still wasn't even sure about that one, but she's pointing out that Valentine killed Jocelyn's parents. The part that she brings up that I hadn't thought of, she brings up that Valentine probably killed Michael Wayland and his son. Because where were the bones from of the adult male and the infant that were in the burned manor house? He probably killed Michael Wayland and his son to make it look like Valentine and Jonathan Christopher were dead. Jace grabs Clary from off of Luke. Valentine is going to kill Luke. She's still trying to get out of Jace's grip. Jace is telling her not to look. He says that he just wants what's good in life, his father, his family, and that he can't lose it all again. Clary turns to face Jace. She's trying to get through to him. She says, you have a family. Family, those are just the people who love you, like the Lightwoods love you. Alec, Isabel, her voice cracked. Luke is my family, and you're going to make me watch him die just like you thought you watched your father die when you were 10 years old. Love a chosen family trope, when the found families start found familying. Oh, I love it. This does get through to Jace, as it should. That was excellent. Jace pushes Luke out of the way, saving Luke, and then faces Valentine head on and says, my name is Jace Wayland. Valentine is taunting Jace and saying that Jace can't kill him because Jace is too soft-hearted and that Jace prefers the half-bred demon, Luke, the nice man named Luke, to Valentine. Jace is saying, you let me think that I was an orphan. You abandoned me. Valentine's saying that he did it because he had to keep him safe. Clary pushes about the grandparents, and then Valentine finally screams, okay, yes, fine, I killed the grandparents. They sided with Jocelyn, and he knew Jocelyn was going to leave him and that the parents were going to let Jocelyn take the son and leave. This was new information that Valentine knew that Jocelyn was planning on leaving. That's why he killed everyone and faked his death to Jocelyn. Clary really legally blonded her way into that one. We get that crack in the armor for Jace now, where he's starting to see, okay, maybe Valentine isn't chill, cool, fun dad. Jace has Valentine at knife point still. Clary is worried that he's going to kill Valentine, and she knows that they need the cup. So Luke takes over for Jace to make sure that Jace doesn't get too stabby happy, and Valentine says that the cup is in Idris. Luke knows that if the cup is in Idris, that Valentine used the portal to get it there. So Luke says, you and I are going to go through the portal. You're going to show me where the cup is, and then we're going to come back here. So Luke's going to go through the portal with Valentine to grab the cup. Luke tells Clary to stay with Jace. No, I'm sorry. He actually tells Clary to stay with her brother. Stop saying it. Stop saying it. The plan is that after Luke and Valentine go through the portal, Clary and Jace will go somewhere safe. The battle outside is getting closer, and Alaric comes in. I like that Alaric made it, again, because I like him. Valentine throws his dagger at Luke, but Alaric takes it instead. Okay. Bye-bye now. Gone too soon. At least we got good wall pictures out of him. Valentine runs for the portal. Jace going after him tells Clary to stay put. That means that Clary has to run after them. Valentine says that Clary's like her mother. She doesn't like to do what she's told. Alaric's not going to make it. Luke is trying to help him. Now that Luke is tied up, Jace is trying to go through the portal with Valentine. He wants to go with Valentine to grab the cup, but Clary thinks that Valentine will kill him. Clary says let the clave handle it, but Valentine is now through the portal in Idris and telling Jace to come home with him. And we see here that Jace is tempted. So they're still facing each other, a foot away from each other, right next to each other, but Valentine is through the portal standing in Idris. Jace is at Renwick's, and he can see Idris behind him. He can see his home. He can see his father, who he thought was dead. Jace is still holding him at knife point. Valentine pulls Jace's hand that's holding the dagger directly to his chest and starts pushing it inside enough to pull blood. He's calling Jace's bluff here. The second that the dagger starts drawing blood, Jace pulls his hand back. Valentine punches the portal and destroys it. Very rude. There were only 2 of them. Valentine has now escaped to Idris. The crew is left behind at Renwick's. Jace is pretty messed up. The funny thing about this is that I ended up with 70 pages of notes for the first book. The amount of notes that I have that just start with Jace is upset. Jace is upset. Clary is confused. Jace is upset. So many. This one, the same thing. Jace is upset. He's pretty messed up. Jace is by the broken portal. He's touching the broken shards from the portal. You can still see Idris in the shards. Clary is trying to help him. He's been pushing her away every time she goes to touch him. Kind of fair. But he finally pulls her into his arms. It's a sweet moment. They're leaning on each other for support. They now think that they're brother-sisters, so they're acting accordingly. I don't want to talk about it. It is now a week later. Clary is visiting the hospital where Jocelyn is. She's walking around and there's a part where she's talking to the front desk lady at the hospital and she's wondering if the front desk lady could be a demon. And I realized that would be really weird. After finding out that basically there's this whole world that you knew nothing about and it's everywhere. The police officers were demons. Everybody in this book that could have been a demon was a demon pretty much at every turn. You're going to walk around now looking at everyone kind of different. Like, you good? Luke is in Jocelyn's hospital room with brother Jeremiah. Luke was asking him to help Jocelyn, but Jeremiah says that it's not their place to help people who have left the clave. 1, rude. You should always help others. 2, it's Joss. She potentially saved the world by taking the cup away from Valentine, and that's what you're gonna do? Luke tells Clary that Magnus Bane healed Alec, so I guess Alec is alive. Okay. Alec and Izzy were barely in this book, it felt like to me. I'm waiting for way more content with them. I'm looking forward to it. Magnus checks Jocelyn also, but he couldn't figure out what's wrong with her. We find out that Jocelyn is not in a normal coma, which we kind of knew. There's no injury, there's no lack of oxygen, no sudden brain or heart failure. It's just like she's asleep and can't be woken up. Luke is staying with Jocelyn, of course. Simon is picking up Clary downstairs. Simon is taking Clary to the Institute. She hasn't been back since Renwick's. Jace had called her to tell her that Alec and Izzy were okay and that the Lightwoods were on their way home now that they were finally filled in on everything that's been going on in New York. Simon is asking if it's weird now with Jace, but Clary kind of snaps at him. It's obviously still a sore subject and says no and nothing happened between them anyway, which Simon doesn't believe, nor should he. The red string doesn't lie. Clary asks Simon to come over tomorrow to watch a movie and eat some popcorn. He agrees and kisses her on the cheek, and it says that she shivers. Okay. Simon has to be pumping the air right now. His main competition has basically just been disqualified. Clary's at the Institute now. She runs into Izzy, and Izzy fills Clary in on her story. Izzy had heard the crash from Clary breaking the barrier in the library when Izzy was in the infirmary with Alec, but everyone was gone. She knows that Hodge's curse is broken, but she doesn't know about the betrayal and him working with Valentine. Her and Alec also weren't told about their parents' involvement with the circle, so they still don't know the full backstory there. So with Hodge, Izzy knows that the curse was broken. She just assumes that Hodge was scared that the clave was going to come after him or for some sort of retribution there, so that he ran. She's disappointed that he left without saying goodbye, but she hopes to see him again. She doesn't know the full story. She was left with Alec, who was on death's doorstep, panicking, but then Magnus showed up and healed Alec, stayed with him all night, and Magnus was getting updates from the Downworlder Gossip Network. That Downworld Gossip Network seems like it's just always churning. The devil works hard, but the Downworld Gossip Network works harder. Magnus is getting all of these updates about everything that's going on at Renwick's, so everybody knows everything that happened at Renwick's now, and Izzy tells Clary that she's famous now. They don't know how Magnus knew to come to heal Alec, but then Clary remembers that Hodge sent a letter after the curse was broken. Clary's assuming that that letter was to Magnus to let him know to come heal Alec. He made sure Alec would live even after the betrayal. Izzy tells Clary that Jace and Clary are now the famous brother and sister, Valentine's famous kids. It still hurts a piece of my heart hearing everything be described this way. Clary is surprised Izzy is being nice and says, I didn't think you liked me. And Izzy says that she resented Clary at first, but says she realizes now that that was stupid, and just because she's never had a friend who was a girl doesn't mean she can't learn to have one. Clary says, me too. They both acknowledge this. They both say, okay, we can be friends now. 2 beautiful women stand before me, and I have 2 photos in my hands. You both get your headshots. Well done. Izzy also says that when Clary went missing along with Jace, that she was genuinely worried for Clary too. So I think that they genuinely are friends now, and I appreciate that. They run into Alec on crutches, but he's okay. Alec then offers to walk Clary to the greenhouse himself, and then they talk. They both apologize. Clary says that she shouldn't have said any of it. Correct, but Alec says it was all true. Clary tells Alec that Jace had never said that Alec was scared. It was actually that Alec hadn't killed a demon because he was always protecting Jace and Izzy. Alec thanks Clary for telling him that he was one who had killed Abaddon, even though he knows that he didn't, and they agree to not tell Jace about what either person said. sad. It was a bad day for both of them. Alec makes a joke and it now seems like they're cool. I'm so excited to keep reading the books. I'm really excited to see them all be friends now. Clary finds Jace in the greenhouse. He's sitting watching the portal shard. He's trying to catch a glimpse of Valentine. They discuss that Jace didn't tell Alec and Izzy about Hodge, and Jace says that he knows they'll find out. He just didn't want to be the one to tell them. Clary says that the Clave is handling it now. You gotta let it go. Clary asks why Jace was so drawn to Idris when Valentine was luring him there with the portal. Clary wants to know why Jace has such fond memories of his childhood when his childhood sounded like it was pretty rough. She says Valentine was a terrible father. He killed your pets. He lied to you. And she also says that she knows Valentine hit him. We hadn't had this definitively said before. It was kind of assumed. Don't do violence. I don't know why I have to keep saying this. Jace gives his explanation here. It was kind of confusing to me. I think it's fair, regardless of what your childhood is, to always long for it in a way that it is familiar to you. It is what you know. We're not going to unpack that because I am not a professional and I want to be responsible with how we discuss these things. But his explanation is basically that. It's what he was familiar with. He says that it was the only time he felt sure about who he was and that he used to feel like he belonged there. He says he kills demons because he's good at it. 500 of them, but it's not who he is, and he's good at it because when he thought that his father died, he was free and there were no consequences, but then there was also no one who had a real say in his life either way, or at least he felt that way. He says that he doesn't feel that way anymore because of Clary. If it weren't for Clary, Jace would have gone with Valentine through the portal, and that if it weren't for Clary, he would go after Valentine right now. Jace said that she was the first person to make him feel like he belonged again. He feels this draw to take Valentine down now, but now he also feels drawn to Clary, and Clary's his sister. So there's that family tie now, and I think that he's craving family ties. He does have a respect for her. He does care about her. Clary wants Jace to go to the hospital with her because if Jocelyn hears Jace's voice, she thinks that maybe she'll wake up. Luke had pointed out that Jocelyn had mourned Jonathan Christopher for 17 years. Again with the math. I'm sorry, but look at this. We have to get this right. I told you that the uprising went from 16 years ago to 17 years ago in the span of the 2 weeks of this book. But we also know that the uprising was early 1991. This is late summer, early fall of 2007. No, I guess that works. So maybe it was like 16 and a half years ago, but now that it's August or September, if the uprising was in like late January, early February, now it's closer to 17 years ago. Okay, I buy that. I apologize. And I believe Jonathan Christopher was born in November of 1990, and it's now August 2007. So yeah, that would be about 17 years since she thought that she lost Jonathan Christopher. This is also why Jace's age was a little bit weird, because he's either January 1991 or November 1990. It's like a 3-month difference. It doesn't matter. He would be 16 either way. Jace still has confusing feelings about it all. Yeah, hey, me too. But agrees to go and says that he knows Jocelyn must be amazing because she raised Clary. This is sweet. Obviously, the red string is there, and that's uncomfortable. They both seem committed to being brother-sister now. They both still care about each other. They're just going to kind of forget that everything else happened and be brother-sister, be there for each other. And it's still really sweet to see them interact, even if you're looking at it through that lens now. I mean, we get Clary talking about how she still wants to look cute for him. So, for the most part, even if they're both feeling weird internally and maybe there are things there, how they are presenting themselves to the other person and how they're actually executing these social interactions, they're doing a pretty good job of keeping it at a sibling level. I can't believe I'm talking about this. They take a demon energy motorcycle. Jace got one from Magnus that was left at his apartment. I'd say overall, Jace benefited the most from this book. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of bad. Gained a whole family, got a motorcycle. Mortal Instruments City of Bones, more like Jace gets a whole bunch of shit he didn't have before. The ending scene is Jace and Clary flying over the city. She can see the whole shadow world now. It's amazing, and all the stories are true, going out on that iconic line. I think it ended in a good place. There's obviously still a lot of bad things that need to be handled. We have to get the cup from Valentine. We need to stop Valentine. We need to get Jocelyn awake. Okay, that's priority number 1. We need to wake Joss up. Help us, Jocelyn. We have more of a world introduction now. If I remember correctly, I think the second book sets up a lot, and then the third book just fucking goes so hard. The third book was my favorite when I read them the first time. Book 1 is a lot of world building, setting everything up, and now we have all of the pieces, and we're invested in everything. And we can hit the road from there. And Clary has some new friends with Izzy and Alec. And now that they're on side, as opposed to being little stinkers, they're probably pretty cool people. They seem really fun. Now that we are at the end, I'm going to give out some awards. I wanted to give some of my overall thoughts in a more structured way, and so I figured awards could be a good way to do that. I will be giving out a most valuable player, MVP, as well as a most improved. MVP, I mean, do you even have to ask? It's Jocelyn. I know what you're thinking. I can hear you. How can you give MVP to someone who spent most of the book unconscious or off screen? Nothing in this book happens without Jocelyn. Well, I mean, if Jocelyn wasn't here, a lot of things would have happened and they all would have been the end of the world. But nothing else happens in this book the way that it does without Jocelyn. She is the one who set all of this in motion. She was on the right side of things ultimately with the circle. She worked undercover with this cold-blooded killer who was a monster. She could have been caught. She could have been killed. She fought against them. Then she takes the cup and bounces. She was able to raise Clary to be as normal as possible. I know there are arguments there for whether or not she should have been honest with her sooner. I'm not getting into that. The point is that for what her goal was, she achieved it. She wanted Clary to grow up in a normal world and not have to worry about it. She moved to New York by herself with her child. She finds this guarded home to live in. She keeps the cup hidden, even having that in a place where the only person who could get it would be Clary and making sure that nobody else would ever get it. She put so many things in motion and she got shit done. It's Jocelyn. She's MVP. The next award is most improved. It has to go to the underdog that everyone discounted. This character didn't even have to save everybody else as many times as they did. It was like they couldn't help themselves. Simon. He was portrayed as the nerd that doesn't get the girl, the mundane, nobody wanted him around. He saved them so many times. He saved them as a rat. He didn't even have a human body and he was still saving them. He sent a greater demon back to its own dimension. Have they done that? I mean, probably, but still, good for Simon. I'm happy about it. I'm not gonna give out any negative awards, okay? We're only gonna give out the positive awards. These are good ones. They did great jobs. Joss and Simon, congratulations. And this is where we stand at the end of book 1. It's been really fun to reread these series and to go back to it. It has been so much fun to do something like this with this format. I really do love this series. This series really did mean a lot to me. We're making jokes here, we're having fun with it, but sometimes when you're living life, things happen at the right time for stuff and things can have really big meaning to you, and this book has just always been one of those things for me. So this was really fun. I am planning on doing all 6 books if this is something that works, if this is something that people like. It was a lot of work, so let me know if this is one of those things. If anybody is watching this, it's really scary to do something like this. So again, if you're here, thank you for doing this with me. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. I will hopefully see you soon.